Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a meeting of the North Penn School District Board of School Directors, May 3rd, 1995, date of our meeting. This meeting is to review the proposed preliminary budget for 95-96 fiscal year. This meeting is being videotaped for community cable channels. Individuals attending this meeting and intending to speak to the board should be aware that they are being videotaped, and in order to meet the requirements of Pennsylvania Sunshine Law, it is necessary to record the names of all citizens who speak to the board during the meeting. To assure compliance with this requirement, it is essential that those planning to address the board come to the microphone and state their name and address, please. Members of the audience are asked to limit their questions and comments to no more than 5 minutes. This limit will permit time for all of those who wish to speak to the board to do so. Whenever members of the audience exceed this time limit, the board president, and in this case I am President Pro Tem again this evening, President Bowman is away in Washington on business, may ask the individual to yield the microphone to the next speaker. And I will do that if you exceed the 5 minutes, but please feel free to circle around and take the time that you need after everyone has gone through once. This is a reference to Board Policy 8344.2. This meeting is scheduled to conclude at 10 o'clock p.m., and we will hold to that. And Dr. Persing, for the record, will there be an executive session tonight?
There will not be.
There will not be. Okay. We got happy campers tonight.
The other board
That is wonderful. Yeah, now they'll come in. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, last night, many of you I see are in attendance again tonight, and I applaud you for your consistency in being here with us. The board is also consistent. I do anticipate Mrs. Scher to arrive momentarily. Mrs. Leahy is absent again, and President Bowman, I hope, will be back next week. As of last night, we did stop at Dr. Fike and Mrs. Clark, and if they wish to pick up, I know I had questions, but I wasn't sure if you had some precursory remarks you'd like to make before we begin again. It's up to you.
President Mango, I have the information on the science fair participation, and I'll pass that around. Basically, it states that in last September, there was a great deal of interest by the students, and then with the labor dispute, a great deal of attrition occurred. And what they're saying in this particular communication is that they're going to start this spring yet for the students and find out if they have some interest in certain projects, hopefully work over the summer, and with a normal school year we should have more participation, but they will monitor. But that's in a nutshell, but this is a complete explanation. Okay.
Dr. Fike, I brought that up because I know it's been a source of contention in this district for a long time, certainly long before you've been here, and long before Donna Brown became a supervisor here of science. But now that we do have a supervisor and we do have the Mark grant, I think we should almost make it a goal or an objective to have a percentage of students in a high school of 2,200 participating in science fairs throughout the local region, the state, etc. And I think that's a goal we should make real soon.
I agree.
My other questions, and Dr. Fike, I'll stay with you. As I'm sure you've been told, there was a lot of concern at a time when the board fully realized and became cognitive that the honors program was no longer in the middle schools and that our teachers were with a team teaching concept. I think the concept in itself was kind of fuzzy to many of the board members, but it wasn't something, it wasn't a move that many of the board members felt they made clearly, allowed to happen in a clear, focused way. And I do understand that the team teaching that we have at the middle schools is a more expensive program or format than the traditional way we used to do it, certainly when I was here, by ability grouping. And I know it would be my wish, and I'm only speaking for myself, that we return to the traditional ability grouping method of placing these students in classes and returning the honors program to the middle school. And I was wondering if you could address that.
Yes, I spent some time this year trying to glean what has occurred. The board and the teachers, administrators have developed the middle school concept. Prior to that, 7th grade was kind of I call it block scheduling, the ability, the homogeneous grouping. What has occurred is the middle school concept philosophically is really no levels. You don't have a 4, a 5, and a 6. When this district adopted the middle school concept, you brought in the team teaching, but then you still kept the level 4 and level 5. Actually, you have 5 levels at the middle school. You take out your special education, and let's take 7th grade, for instance, at Pembroke. Right. There's 41 students that are special ed, and they have no, well, I'm saying no, they have the mainstreaming for the 5 majors. There's 5 majors of 7th grade. Those are direct instruction. That's one group. Then you take out the basic ed, and there's 18 in basic ed. So now you've taken the special ed in the second group. Then you have a group 4.0, then you have a group 5.0, and then you have a group gifted. We have 62 gifted in the 7th grade. I really would not support going to a 6th group and having an honors group yet. If you go that direction with team teaching, you might as well stay with block scheduling and not have team teaching. The idea of middle schools is to have in each of your teams a low, a middle, and a high-level student. It permits them to teach one another the co-op learning approach, the peer approach, projects, working with all different levels. We kind of have a mix of block scheduling and team teaching. I don't think this is at first. Then the next thing I want to mention is when the board and administrators went into this, you planned and should have had in the fall differentiated teaching in service. Teachers can, within a group, whether they have a 4 level or 5 level or a 6 level, create projects for kids that have ability, let's say science. There's certain kids, no matter what their level is, have a love and have a particular ability and can do well, and therefore the teacher gives them additional assignments and projects that they can do above and beyond the normal teaching. That happens in history, it can happen in math, all your academics. That was never done because of labor dispute. We never had in service any of the staff at the middle school to have differentiated teaching. Unfortunately, one of the staff members said since we dropped honors, and that's really what caused this whole fracas, since we dropped honors, we will no longer have honors projects. Well, that's a misnomer because there are teachers in the middle school giving projects, but they don't call them honors projects. And they do give them projects above and beyond. I know in the English, they're getting literature for those kids that can handle it. And in fact, Mrs. Miller's running some of that instruction. So you can, within a middle school concept, take care of your honors kids. I could not support in a middle school having 6 groups with 400 kids, or 471 this year, having 6 different groups. 5 is bad enough, and then to add the honors to it, you might as well go back to block scheduling. I do not believe that this district should, in September, drop team teaching and go back to block scheduling. I'm sure you'll save money, but I think they have an investment at least of 1 year, and I'd try it 2 years, and then long range, when you go 7, 8, 9 in this district, then you make a decision. Are you going to stay with team teaching, or are you going to go to back to block scheduling?
Okay, Dr. Fike, have you or Dr. Persing been able to run numbers for us as to the difference in cost between team teaching and the traditional grouping that we had before?
May I answer that, Dr. Persing? The Penfield and Pembroke have 5 more teachers than Penndale, same enrollment, roughly 900.
5 each?
5 each.
Total of 10 more teachers.
The other thing that went into expense, you have about $500,000 worth of extracurricular because you began interscholastics. You have the whole gamut, every sport that you can think of, and they're interscholastic, they're no longer intramural. And then with the marching band, you went into the uniforms, and of course, having a band in each grade level, that created more expense. The figure of somewhere around $750,000 is probably accurate what it costs to go into the middle school concept.
The team teaching.
Right, the team teaching.
Could any of that cost be attributed to
We'll go around. We'll go
having
around.
2 grade levels in Broken Field as opposed to 1 grade level in Pendale? Any of the extra teachers?
No, because it's the same role. When you block schedule, you can, first of all, as Mr. Smith mentioned the other night, some teachers have 6 periods. You can't do that with team teaching. You're locked into 5 periods.
Right.
So that created a chance at, and we've done it at Penndale, we have fewer teachers because some of the teachers are teaching 6 periods.
But Dr. Fike, there's probably a combination of things here. One is the fact that if it were a true middle school concept, like a 6, 7, 8 or something like that, we probably would not have engaged in attempting to have all of the monies put forth for marching bands, interscholastic activities, and things like that, which are not consistent with a middle school. But I think we had a combination of a middle school academically and a junior high school interscholastically
Yes.
or with competition. And that's a costly combination, as I understand it. Is that a fair statement?
It is, yes.
So it would be your professional recommendation that if we were to return back to traditional groupings as opposed to this team teaching, that we should wait until 7, 8, and 9 are properly in the buildings of Penfield, Pembroke, and Penndale
Right.
when that time comes, and that we
And-
not attempt to do that now.
Right, in long range, again, it's my opinion and recommendation that I would put 9 to 12 interscholastics, and I would keep 7, 8 intramural.
Okay. Ralph, I'll yield the floor to you. I know you had a question, but I want to come back to mine when you're done.
Okay, I guess I think we've got several issues involved here. There's a team teaching issue, and then there's the middle school levels issue, if you have 7, 8, 9. And in the team teaching issue, and I was a member of the committee that looked at the curriculum that was going to be taught. And after great debate, looking for what was the best way to do it, I think that the team teaching, while by definition, I think probably would be listed as more expensive primarily from the aspect of, it is true, you get 5 periods out of, when you're teaching in a team, you get 5 periods and you can't get 6. And we get 6 out of 30%, or it varies from year to year, teachers. You can't get 6 out of those. In fact, Dr. Fike's probably right, there are probably 10 more teachers at Brook and Field, but that's primarily because as we did the layout, if you put them in 2 buildings versus 3, you needed 8 teams versus 7.
Right.
And that's the 10 teachers, 5 teachers on a team, 7th grade and 8th grade, and I think those are the extra teachers that we're talking about, and that was part of the package for putting them in 2 versus 3 buildings. But a totally separate issue is how you're going to run the middle school program when you run a 7th, 8th, and 9th grade program. When we ran 6th and 7th, which was the prior concept, that was all intramural. And the interscholastic, there was 18 at the 8th grade and 18 at the 9th grade. And one of the things that was discussed and brought in front of the board, separate from team teaching, was, are we going to do interscholastics? And there is an active interscholastic 7th, 8th grade interscholastic sports organization that we participated at Penndale at the time. And the question was, were we going to take the 8th grade, with 7th grade being the junior varsity of that in most sports, and participate in that, or were we going to take that away from the 8th grade and make 8th grade intramural? And so the question was, we had an 8th grade interscholastic program, and at that time, and I think it came in front of the board, that we would keep that interscholastic program and put it at 3 schools, since we were going to have 8th grade in 3 schools versus just the 1 school. And yes, that is more expensive than intramural, but were we going to take something away from our 8th graders, or were we going to spread it around? It is more expensive, but it does provide more opportunities. I think that most of the people in education, if you give the choice, and that was discussed at least in the meetings about curriculum, you can take a choice. You can have intramural or you can have interscholastic. You don't have the fields to do both. And I think that the decision there and at the board was to do interscholastic at the 8th grade at all 3 buildings. That's totally separate whether you team teach in those buildings, the interscholastic program.
I agree with Ralph. They're 2 separate issues, but they all equate to a lot of money. And the linchpin concern for me would be the 10 additional teachers at an average salary around here of $52,500 times benefits, times perks, blah, blah, blah. That equates to millage. And so I'm going to mull over your recommendation that we wait till we're back to 7, 8, and 9. I'm going to think that over, but that is a concern.
Incidentally, instructionally, it's a sound program. When I want to think that Pembroke Penfield isn't offering a good program, they are. But I just think that we budgeted for 95.6 for the same type of program. I really think the year to make a change and you have a year to study it is 96.7. You have all 3 grades in 3 different buildings.
Dr. Fike, I'm not saying that it was a bad program, but nobody told me that the traditional way was bad either. So,
I never said it was a bad program.
okay.
No.
I'm not passing
Right now, you
judgment
have
on
part
team
middle
teaching. It's an
school and
expense
part-
that we weren't ready for.
But right now, I think you have part middle school and part block scheduling, as long as you want to have 5 or 4 and 5 levels, the other levels. And if you promote an honors group, that I think you're just not being fair to a middle school concept. You might as well go all back to block scheduling.
Bill, did you have another concern?
Yes.
Go ahead.
When this subject came up 4 months ago, 5 months ago, when we were made aware that there was not the honors program, I realized that I am not qualified to pass judgment on what is the right way to teach and the wrong way to teach and the better way and the not so good way. So I went to the 2 middle schools, Brook and Field, spoke to, I guess, a total of maybe 6 teachers and 1 principal, and expressed my concerns about the idea that we're having what we call the team teaching, and my concern that we're putting different groupings in the same classes, in the same groups, which seem to be the concerns. And it's a concern of mine also, and one of my concerns was, are we having the honors kids become teachers in their classrooms to those that can't keep up the pace, which I think is a bad concept, personally. And I was assured that that is not the case. And I can't prove it. I can just tell you that the people told me that this does not happen in the classroom. The second thing that they were all pretty emphatic about is that they're learning the concept of team teaching at the moment, the teachers, the principals, and it wouldn't be fair to judge it, but they all were very enthusiastic about their interaction with the students, how much better they get to know the students' abilities, the students' personality, traits, problems, situations. They do feel that if the concept works educationally, that it will be better teaching. So I'd like us to not just throw this out because it's something new and it's not the way it was done. I don't know that it's working perfectly now, but from the people that are doing it, they did seem to have a lot of enthusiasm for the potential of this type of teaching.
Bill, I agree with you, but somewhere along the way, somebody determined something was broke and decided to fix it, and
Well,
I don't think it was broke. And $750,000 to $750,000 is anticipated. This could be the difference in what we had before to what we have now is a significant amount of money that I would have preferred plowed into textbooks. But be that what it may, Judy, if I could go on to you, to your alternative programs. Yeah. And I heard you say last night that you were looking at the future to bring this home, bring these kids back into the district, and to run that program ourselves and possibly be on the cutting edge of that by allowing spots to local school districts that could take tuition spots. And I guess I would encourage you not to go too far into the future, but I'd encourage you to do that now. I think now's the time. If we're going to have, while we have the expertise of Drs. Persing and Fike with us and their strong support, and while you were looking at changing, the possibility of changing the way taxes are done here, I think if there's going to be program changes, this is the year to do all the changes. And I'd encourage you to go ahead and do it this year. And if that is possible, do you feel that's possible?
We only need the space, and we can move as quickly as possible.
Will you be putting a group together, or how, where are you going to go from here?
Mr. Wood and I have met with Lakeside early in December this past school year, and Colonial, as I said the other night, already has a program in-house that's working very, very well. And Lakeside has done this in a number of other school districts. They are ready with the proposal. They can move quickly. The problem that we had, and we talked about this in December, is there wasn't a spot here in the district to have that program. I mean, the other things we could work out, but we need some physical space to put these students. And if we had that, we certainly could move as quickly as possible on this, because the program already exists.
So where are you going from here? What are you going to do?
Well,
Or is that forthcoming? Is that another day?
it is another day, and
Okay.
because there's certain negotiations going on that I wish I could tell you publicly, but until such time as we're able to talk with the proper people and bring it back, it would be premature for us to say much more than that. You know how negotiations go. You've been involved in that, and sometimes you can't say what you'd like to say.
That's very true. That's most true. Are there any board members working on this with the cabinet?
Not yet, but I would, anyone who's willing to work on this, I'd be grateful for this.
I would volunteer, and I guess before you guys go too far down the path, I'd like to see a board member involved, and I would volunteer, and
Great.
certainly, if we wish to see others, that would be good.
Wonderful.
Okay,
We can get the gentleman here next week.
Said you got me till December anyway.
there you go.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
Judy, you have here local alternative programs. What about those that are not local? Or do we have kids in schools that are not local?
Well,
Any residential schools? These are all day schools, right?
these are all day schools. The court placements that occur, there are several places throughout the state that sometimes children that get into trouble with the law are remanded to, such as George Junior Republic and several other
They're lockups?
institutions, yes.
They're lockups.
And unfortunately, we do have several students that are in those facilities that we do pay part of the cost for. But
And that'll show up where in the budget?
We do not send them there. They
No.
are sent there by the courts. The facilities that we use are all local for the direct placements that we have.
Those special kids, where are they in the budget? Would you just know off the top of your head, or could you get that to me?
I can get that to you.
The line item
That
there.
is, I believe, tuition in state. Dennis and I,
11520.
28,000.
1100, 500.
1152.
11520.
What a
I
guy.
think there's
What a guy.
250,000 in it.
And any students in residential, other than lockups, in any residential schools?
George Junior Republic is residential. It's out this side of Pittsburgh, Grove City.
No Devereaux kids?
There are special ed students, and yes, we do have several of those who are residential students. Some that are 7-day residential students. They're there all the time. And that's because of the severity of the handicapping condition. They require that type of program.
That program.
Again, too, I need to tell you that the state, luckily, is still paying 60% of their tuition costs. We pay 40 at the current time. Now, again, that's subject to change.
Last question, if your alternative, the possibility of an alternative school being brought our way would house or educate how many students? How many do you see bringing back home?
We probably, about 40, I would say. And then we would be working with the court system too,
Right.
to see that we could have some of those placements also.
But how many students we have placed in
The direct-
alternatives right now?
The direct placements, 39 this year.
I'm talking about direct and court.
78,
Okay.
78.
That's good.
Okay, well, I'm saying that if we went after facilities, we would want to have the capability of handling more than 40. It's 78, and
absolutely.
and assuming you get a facility, you'd want to be able to handle and
At
maybe
least
even
100.
market it to other.
Right. At least
It's
100.
very manageable.
Yes,
And
it
it'd be an
is.
incredible savings to this district.
It would be.
A follow-up related question, because I think all of our objectives is to get kids so that they don't have to go into these alternative programs. That's when a serious problem has evidenced itself. Either the court places them, or we do because of the health, safety, and welfare of the other students in the schools, and to provide them an adequate education. but I know that we also have programs, and I don't know, is this separately going to be covered, the PASS program and some of those, where we get some early signals and start to address the kids so they don't get this far?
Well, we have been doing that for years, but when we get to an alternative placement such as these outside of the district, generally those students have either failed consistently their attendance problems or severe behavioral problems that we can no longer handle in district.
I guess my question was, as we go through the budget, I wanted to hear what the numbers were and what the support was for in the coming budget for the precursor programs that try to head these things off at the pass.
I will work with Dr. Fike and get those numbers for
Okay,
you.
and the PASS program, I know that in the middle school concept that changes, because that's one of the focuses of the PASS program is in the
Right.
middle school arena. And what is that budget impact this year, in the coming year is what I'm interested in.
I will get that
Thank
for
you.
you.
Okay, I don't have any further questions last time around for board members. Mrs. Paskey? No, we started up last time. Mrs. Paskey?
Thank you. Dr. Fike, I have questions about the team teaching.
Yeah.
I don't have all the facts. I wish Mrs. Scher were here right now. She's more familiar with this. But I believe team teaching was done before and it was disbanded. I don't know if that was because of cost or performance or what, for the kids. I don't know how long ago that was, but
I'm with you, I don't know either.
I haven't.
It was, team teaching has been in the early middle school concept, 6th, 7th grade.
Right.
Team teaching was in the 6th grade. And it wasn't disbanded.
This is an
That doesn't
expansion.
sound right.
It's an expansion. It was never
Of the current
disbanded as far as I
concept,
know.
It
It
was
was a concept that's been expanded to
7th and 8th.
7th and 8th, but it's been in 6th and it's been there for as long as I can remember.
And I think that was the success at the 6th is what led people to look at it for 7th and 8th in the first place.
The other question, we have interscholastic sports at the 7th, 8th, and 9th grade level?
Correct.
And how many students can that accommodate?
Well, for instance, we just approved track, they had 82 total at Penfield, and almost that same many at Penbrook. But every sport, probably baseball would have a limitation, and I know they were doing some cuttings on sports, but I don't have, if you want every sport and how many participate, I don't know that I can
I
find out.
believe in Penndale baseball, they had about 80 students come out, and the cuts went down to, 15 to 20?
Right.
If
And
we-
then that's the reason track starts 2 or 3 days later, because they'll have
Yeah,
track.
catch
that's
all,
right.
right?
That's right. That's right.
To me, that's too competitive at that level. It eliminates too many children. They don't get the opportunities that we're so proud that we offer.
That's why I would recommend intramurals.
Yeah, that's what I would like to see too. At least up to the 9th grade, if not even further.
The 9th grade, you can actually play senior high sports like on super froshes, so I would definitely start in those classes by 9th grade. I wouldn't have any problem with that. 7, 8, you'd have greater participation with an intramural program.
Yeah, it just seems too early to start cutting the kids that.
As far as too early to cut, but not too early for organized sports when you look at the biddy leagues.
No, I don't mean organize, yeah, my kids are in it too, but I don't mean to cut the sports
Right.
program. I mean to add, expand the opportunity. If we're going to have it, then let as many kids as want to play, whether they're good or not. And let them find out at the senior high or at the college level whether they're good enough for professional. But right now, take care of them all. And with 80 kids that came out for baseball, you'd have at least 9 teams rotating and playing in an
Right.
intramural thing, as opposed to one team of 20 kids
Right.
and 60 kids with bruised egos that were still good, good enough to try out. I'm done. Thank you.
Mr. Camp, any
And
more?
I should leave this one alone, but I'll point out, 2 years ago, we had an 8th grade baseball team, and there were more cuts, and there's now 2 8th grade teams, and if we expand it, there'd be 3 8th grade teams, and unfortunately, and I don't have the exact data, but I hate to tell you about it, folks, but when there were intramurals, they didn't come out in the same fashion, because they just went to the Little League, and they didn't come out for, there is the reason that there were 80 or 100 kids coming out for baseball because it was interscholastic. not intramural. And when they had intramurals for 7th graders at the middle schools, I don't think that you're going to find, go back and look at the attendance and see if there were 9 teams. There weren't. And it's the interscholastic that's drawing those kids out. And that's one of the reasons why they talked about going interscholastic. They had it at the 8th grade, not to take it away, but what happens is when you have 3 8th grade teams instead of 1 8th grade team, which we used to have over here at Penndale, you get triple the opportunities used to be before, and you do get a lot more kids coming out, and there was a lot of concern expressed in that committee, both from educators, parents, and administrators who were there about whether they should have cuts or what they should do. And I was under the impression it was going to be a JV team, but because of, I think, money, it didn't turn out. Yeah. But you do significantly expand the opportunities, and I think that the draw of the interscholastic was a major thing. And somebody can go back and look at that. I suspect it's true.
Mr. Weitz? Mr. Allen?
I'm done.
Mrs. Shaw, you probably don't even know where we're at, but that's okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Team teaching and
We'll come back around. Okay, at this time, we'll turn to the audience of citizens. I asked you last night if you had questions in this area of curriculum, and Mrs. Clark's department to come forward. Mr. Ross.
Hi, I'm Jeff Wallace from Lansdale. This is the first topic we've hit in the budget I can really get excited about, because this is the things that really make the difference in the education for the kids. I share Mr. Weitz's excitement and enthusiasm about the Merck Science Program. It's fantastic. And I would hope that if Merck pulls all of their funding, that we don't stop with programs like this, that these are, at this level, this is the time that the students really can get an interest and a love for learning about science and math. And with the way the technology is growing, this is an incredibly vital area that we need to address more. I had the opportunity to speak to Mrs. Brown last night too, before she left, and she's more excited about it than I am, and that's fantastic. She is truly an asset to the district. What I would like to know though is what we can do to increase this program into the high school. I realize that the Merck Science Partnership doesn't allow that. It's made for K through 8, but there are, I'm sure, a lot of equipment and curriculum programs that we should be doing at the high school level to also help in educating in the science and math areas. One suggestion that I have, and I'm sure this will not necessarily be heavily accepted, is we have a tremendous amount of budget reserve set aside for the potential settlement of the teacher strike. Considering that the teachers are not in any rush to settle, if we could take at least some of that off the table and put it into curriculum, where it really does matter and has a great impact on the lives of all of the students. I'm also happy about the initiative that we're looking into by Dr. Clark to bring all of our students back to the district. I think it's important for them to feel at home here and not outcast and pushed off into other areas. And the savings aside, I think that's a big plus for all of those students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ross.
Can I just make a couple of comments about the science curriculum, just to let you know. Number one, the first thing that the Merck Institute requested this school district, which we obviously went out and did, was to find the best science supervisor we possibly could. And in conjunction with hiring Mrs. Brown, the Science Curriculum Review Committee has been in operation for just about a year. I think some of the textbook changes that we talked about are just starting to come around. And if you think about what the Merck Institute is trying to accomplish and their focus on K through 8, it would be very difficult for us as a district to implement that program K through 8 and then all of a sudden have it drop off the face of the earth at the 9th grade. And I think that's where the Curriculum Review Committee comes in, to take that type of instruction, the style of instruction, which is called hands-on in some cases, minds-on in another, and to make sure that that is implemented at the senior level. And I'm confident that we're going to do that through our curriculum review. And just because their focus and their dollars are directed towards building this in at the elementary level, which is an area that they've chosen to focus on, it's obvious that we're going to have to pick up the ball at the senior high school level, and I believe we're going to do that.
What's the timeframe on that?
When is that report coming out? It should be shortly, the report from the science, anybody? Again, it's been in operation for about a year. I think some of the textbooks that will be on display coming up shortly are part of that implementation. There will be a full report to the community about the curriculum, and at that time, I believe 9 through 12 will be addressed.
One thing I'd like to add, though, I have a science background, so does Dr. Persing. The science taught 9 through 12, you can't teach science, I don't think, without hands-on. I think the move by Merck in the district was to make sure there was more of that done in the elementary through 8th grade, but all the books, and I had an opportunity to sit in about 8 science sections, actually 12, 7 through 9 since I've been there, 7 through 12. I can tell you they are teaching science with hands-on. I wouldn't want anyone to think we're devoid of having hands-on instruction in science from 9 to 12. It's happening there. I've seen it in the classroom. We even have student aides setting up experiments that helps the science teacher do that. And I think you'd agree, Dr. Persing, you can't teach secondary without having hands-on.
No, having taught physics and chemistry and biology on the senior high level, I can attest to the fact that it's impossible to do it any other way. That's why, of course, we have 7 periods of science in the senior high, and so that we have double lab periods. Merck did a wise thing. They really did, because science K through 6 has always been shortchanged. If you went down to science and saw what was taught, you might see the lima bean experiment from kindergarten to 1st to 2nd to 3rd 10 years ago. You wouldn't see that in this program. This program, Jeff, is a wonderful program. But that's not my point. My point is that when they make this happen, it's going to continue because it's a natural sequence. That's what I'm trying to point out.
That also was my point.
My fear, though, is that we're not addressing the changing world of technology at the high school level. The technology, the past, even just the past 3 or 4 years, has advanced a tremendous amount, and opportunities that we can and should give to our students are take money in the means of equipment and things like that. And my fear is that since Merck is nice enough to help us out in financing the curriculum at the elementary school level, we're taking advantage of that. And I just want to make sure we're not losing sight of the needs in advancing the technology at the senior high school level. I don't know. I went to 3 different high schools, so I know that the different pieces of equipment that standard high schools have and special high schools have. And I know that the experiments that the students can do with special pieces of equipment that aren't necessarily available at all high schools. But because of the advancement in technology and stuff, a lot of that is becoming more available because it's becoming cheaper. And I'm just interested in us acquiring some of that for the senior high school also.
I'd like to say that you can't separate technology from science anymore. They're very much interrelated.
Always have been.
Yeah. But the issue of where this district is going as it relates to technology, and the issue of where this district is going right now as it relates to its science curriculum, we are, because of the interest of the Merck Institute for Science Education, we are pushing our science curriculum forward much more aggressively than we are pushing our technology track right now. But I believe that every member of this board has expressed, at least to me, a verbal commitment. I think that's also expressed in the budget in some positions that are going to be requested relating to technology. And with the proper people in place, that there will be a strategic plan that will come out of it, that will be an in-house effort, that will address those needs, that will talk about technology as it relates to administrative efforts and curricular efforts.
Okay, but none of this is planned for the coming budget year?
Yes, it is. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
The commitment from this board is that there will be positions that will allow us to more aggressively attack the problems of implementing technology in all areas, administrative and curriculum.
Okay, because it was my understanding at the high school, I guess especially at the high school level, that there wouldn't be any added teachers and such.
I didn't say teachers. I
Okay.
said staff.
I will say teachers. There will be added teachers at the high school.
So there are going to
As
be.
far as I'm concerned, there will be, and Mr. Schmidt's going to get into that this evening.
I'm waiting
Okay.
patiently.
And he's such
Some
a
of that,
patient
some of
man.
that will probably be answered for you shortly.
Okay, I'll sit down and wait for that to all come up. Thank you.
The fact that Merck is a long-term commitment and focusing on the elementary, people talk about science fairs at the high school. Step back, I got news for you, there's science fairs at the middle school too. And what the Merck is doing is getting the kids excited, because we've had a lot of science fair kids. I've run into some of them at the middle schools, and those are the precursors to the high school. And the Merck program is going to focus at the lower grades to get more kids interested. And if you're looking at the longer-term results, we already have a lot of kids. We have one, prominently in the paper at the high school, but every year, quietly in the paper, we've got them at the middle school. And the Merck program is going to have more of them in there. And as they move to the high school, that's a long-term growth thing, get scientists interested and get kids in science fair. But if you're looking for volume, you're going to see it at the middle school first, and then you're going to see it at the high school, because it is a program that grows with all these kids.
Okay, anybody else from the audience? Mrs. Clark? Oh. Go ahead,
I'm
Mr.
Bill Taylor from Lansdale, and this is a distilled set of anecdotes. I know nothing at all about what's going on at Pembroke, but it's my opinion that the teams devoted to special education and the gifted program and so on are putting out the same amount of effort in Penfield, and in Penndale. But the Penndale team has been together for 15 years, am I correct?
Penndale does not have teams, Mr. Taylor.
They're individually.
That's block schedule.
But they work as a group. The teachers work as a
The
group.
teachers at Penndale do work.
They certainly talk like it, and they said
Yes.
they had an in-service program a year or two ago when a resource team came from somewhere else and told them they knew nothing about what they were talking about, meaning the ones who came in as experts didn't know, and they learned here.
They've been together for quite some
Yeah,
time.
but I'm saying that, and this seems to show, they seem to work well.
Yes.
The people, from what I can tell at Penfield, are working hard, but it's awfully ragged. So this is just an anecdotal plea for allowing, not just for dollars, but for time. You are not going to do any better than the Clintons did with the health program if you try to jump all over it right quick.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Mrs. Clark?
Karen Clark, Montgomery Township. This is about the team teaching. I agree with Mr. Redcamp and Mr. White that it was always at 6th grade. And I have a child who's in finishing his second year of college now, so I can go back a while. I can remember as a 6th grade parent going in there, learning about this thing called team teaching, that the way it was explained to us was, it was a way to get the children used to moving around, changing rooms, but you're not changing to 7 teachers. You're staying within, you're staying within a certain circle of teachers. And you got used to the idea because the next year and on up, you were going to be changing into block scheduling. It never, the way I remember it, was never supposed to be expanded and moved on. Those kids were going to learn how to move. And I thought it worked well in 6th grade. I'm now going through my second child who's now in 9th grade. I don't think it works as well as they get older. I understand why it got expanded, but I'd think about it again because those kids are ready to move on.
Thank you, Mrs. Clark.
I'll agree, and by the way, it specifically was not expanded to 9th grade because they didn't think it was appropriate at the 9th grade.
I don't
Mrs.
think it's
Avery.
appropriate at 8th grade.
Linda Abram, Upper Gwinnett.
I just have a question about the local alternative programs that we were discussing earlier. I heard, Judy, you mentioned last night and again tonight about the concern for space if we were to serve these children here. And I certainly do agree that these children need to be served here. Can you tell the public, when you think about this, serving them here, are you talking about currently existing buildings that we have, or are you talking about other opportunities? Are we at a point where we can share that?
Sure. Sorry, I was making a note of what you were saying. We do not have any space in this school district to speak of. As a matter of fact, on Monday, Art and I again are going to go through each of the elementary buildings. Right now, to the best of my knowledge, we only have one art room, one music room that's available. On the 13 elementary schools. We do not have the facilities that we need for expansion in the junior highs, middle schools, call it what you will, for special ed. So we're in the process of looking at it. As you probably know, I've recommended to this board many times that we go 6, 7, 8, and we go 9, 10, 11, and 12. I think that's the best way to go educationally, and I think it's the best way to go financially. Regardless of what happens, that still would be my recommendation. But we still need to consider what we're going to do with the space that's available. The answer to your question is I don't know where those spaces would be for special education, if indeed that's your question. And forgive me, I was making notes while you were talking. The alternative school. And the alternative school?
Yes.
Okay, the alternative school is available if we acquire a facility, a physical facility. That physical facility, we're in the process, I mentioned earlier, to Mrs. Mengel, and we've talked about this at length. If it becomes available and it's within our confines of this school district, I think it would be a worthwhile venture for this school district and the school board to consider. But right now, we don't have that physical facility, but we'd like to acquire it.
Okay. Would we be contracting, would the staff that would work there be contracted services, or would they become our own staff of the district? Do we know that?
Lakeside has done a variety of different things, and that is something that we would talk about. They have had their own staff in certain places, and they've also utilized existing staff.
Because I know the unique quality of these types of students require a tremendously trained
Yes, they do.
and dedicated staff. And I certainly know that any decision we would make as a district would be a well-thought-out plan, but certainly space is only one concern that you would have in a situation like this. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Sherry, you wanted to come back with a comment?
Finish with the audience and citizens. Regarding the teaming, I assume...
Fine, we can do that. We can bring that back. Anybody else from the audience? Anybody at all? Because from this point, it'll go back to Dr. Persing, and it'll be personnel.
And we're ready again to continue, unless someone has a question. We're ready to continue with...
Yes, Mr. Shaw.
We have to have discussion regarding the teaming process?
We did when you weren't here. I don't know if there's any specific
Correct.
questions.
Okay. In the fall, when parents addressed us regarding the teaming process and the elimination of the honors program, I went and I approached a number of educators regarding it. In fact, I spoke to some ex-administrators of this district who was here back in the mid-1980s. And I have to be honest, the reaction to me was that we tried that for 4 years and struggled with it, and the only thing it accomplished was to create more prep time, which meant more personnel expense, absorb more classroom space, and create higher expenses. And as hard as they struggled with it, from the reviews I got, it was a short-lived failure. I personally was stunned to hear what evolved out of last year's programs of study. I had voted against it. I had voted against it because of the study times and the reduction of the electives that I saw within the course, the program of studies that was presented to us. What I didn't see, though, was the elimination of the honors program. And what was not disclosed at that time was such a major restructuring of the middle school curriculum. That was not brought forward to us in the presentation by the committee that brought forward the new program of studies. Perhaps some of us were, maybe not as well educated to read between the lines. I would not like to see it advanced. As a matter of fact, I would like to see the honors program and the ability grouping return to this district. Mainly because of all of the reactions I've received is that the educational benefit is not for the student, it's for personnel. And that's my position on the teaming process.
I think it'd be unfair to go over my presentation earlier. Maybe I should meet with Mrs. Scher and share my comments. That's all right afterwards.
Mr. Sher, what you've just said sounds very similar to what I had said earlier in the evening.
I'm
And Dr.
sorry.
Fike, that's fine. Dr. Fike had been through that. And Dr. Fike, if you'd spend
I
that time
will.
with Mrs. Sher and the response that you gave me, to give her the same one, I'd appreciate that.
I can understand, with this, when you're dealing with a lower grade, or if you're implementing a school within a school concept because of a huge school. But I personally have not had good responses regarding it in our middle schools with our situation here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sher. Dr. Percy?
And again, we're ready for Mr. Schmidt.
And again, I'm ready. It seems it helps to enunciate the fact that in some way we're tied into a science background. I want to announce at this point, because nobody ever asked me before, that I do have general science on my certificate. And I would also announce that I should never be asked to teach that, but I just thought it was important for everybody to understand I have that. Because we're in our technology stuff. As I go through the presentation, it's easier for me to sort of work through it in a logical way. And I understand that logic to one person is one thing, and logic to another person is different. To me, logic would perhaps dictate that we go through it in numeric order, so that that kind of avoids jumping around. But because of the way that different things appear here, there may be one particular item that I can begin a discussion about a topic such as administrative salaries, et cetera. If you turn to page 11 of your book, I'd like to begin there. Page 11 has all the instructional people in the different buildings. And if I can talk about that page, it includes, at the elementary level, it includes all the classroom teachers. It includes art, music, phys ed. It also includes all of the reading people, with the exception of the Title I reading people that are covered in a different section of the budget. And again, what you see as you look down the page, and just to quibble a little bit, I think, with what we were talking about last night when the discussion centered on the budget itself and how easy it is to follow, or perhaps how difficult it is to follow. From my perception, it's really difficult to follow, simply because the numbers that you see don't always reflect exactly what happens at the time the budget is completed, or it doesn't necessarily reflect the final assignments after the budget has been completed. So that if you look at a particular number and then try to equate that budget for 1994 number with the estimated or the budget for 1995, it doesn't always work out exactly. And I think as you look down through the elementary level, you'll see that to be true. You'll see some levels where the numbers seem to be high budget to budget. They will be low budget to estimated. And throughout the budget, you're going to see that in the teacher categories. The reason you'll see that very simply is that we have not expended all the funds that we budgeted for this past year for the teacher salaries because of the lack of the contract. But if I could summarize what you would find between the categories of Gwen Noor as well as down to Walton Farm, that represents a 3.2% increase for all teachers. We have not added any teachers at all this year at the elementary level. I draw your attention to the top line where it says salaries control account 11004, and you see us going from an estimated cost of $156,000 to a zero for this year. That is the category where we have budgeted our instructional support teachers in the past. In this budget, those positions have been eliminated, so that the 0 represents the fact that we no longer will have those particular positions. Mrs. Clark, at any time you're interested, and I think maybe discussed anything last night, I think she touched on it last night, that she's working at a new model. But that is 3 positions that no longer exist as we knew them before. At the very top of the page, we do have to budget separately for sabbatical leaves, and at this point that represents the people that we know have been asked or have asked and been approved for sabbatical leaves for next year. Sabbaticals are available to teachers for either a half year or a full year. The law changed several years ago, which required the board to, in fact, endorse or not endorse the concept that if a person were going to take a sabbatical for travel, that it had to be a full year, as opposed to what it had been in the past, they could take a half year. This board did endorse the fact that if they're going to take it, it would be a full year. And you might remember at that time, too, we rather dramatically restructured our sabbatical policy. But we do have several people at the elementary and secondary level, 1 at the elementary and 2 at the secondary level, who have been approved for sabbatical leaves for next year. So we do budget their salary at that point. Down at the very bottom, under 11080 substitute salary elementary, and then 11097, which is the last line there, the substitutes for secondary. Obviously, with the staff as large as we have, and we have people who are out ill, we also have 3 personal days that people tend to usually take advantage of, so that that's where the money is budgeted, to get substitutes to cover for those people while they are out. If you go to page, the next page, which would be page 12, 11099 and 11100, degree improvement elementary and secondary. You know that according to our contract, we do grant increases in salary for people who improve either a certain number of credits or a degree, and as a result of that, they are awarded an advancement on the salary schedule. This is where we budget money to accommodate those particular changes in the salary structure for that particular movement. Is it appropriate to ask you as I go along, because this is going to take a long while to go through this whole thing, or do you want to wait to the end to ask all your questions?
How about with the board, that at any point that board members just say, excuse me, at that point, and break into this along the way, and the audience, if they would, to write down their questions and save them till the end. Maybe some of the board questions will answer your questions.
I had a quick question, Fred.
Yes.
When we talk about substitute salaries, there's a lot of causes for substitutes. Is this all of the substitutes, or is this, when we have Goal 1, people pulled out for Goal 1 curriculum development and the other activities that we bring teachers out of the classroom for, is that substitute pay here too, or is that going to be buried somewhere else?
It won't be buried, but it is somewhere else.
Somewhere else. Okay.
We actually budget somewhere different for the staff development coverage. You'll also see as we work our way through here that the library and special ed, we also budget separately for those categories.
Okay, could we put on the list that there are a variety of things that, because of the structure of the budget, are split out in multiple places, that if we could bring together, and one of them being substitutes, all of the substitute pay for the year in one place, so we could see what that number is.
Well, staff development is on page 70 under, staff development is
Okay.
on page 7 under
Understand.
2200 series, 22022.
Okay, what I was hoping to do is for some of these
2220.
things like that, is what we've had done, that's what the white sheets often do, is pull that stuff together so we can see the total substitutes for the various causes. Okay, thank you.
Dennis can do that.
I think we're going to have requests like that along the way, Fred, and they're not all in your area. I know when we get to the point where we discuss legal, there's so many different pockets of legal, and I'm going to want that all gathered up by Dennis or whoever provides that.
Exactly.
And put all in one sheet.
That will be Dennis.
$28.
I know it's not
Somewhere
$28,000.
around
The
28,000.
difficulty is that many of that doesn't come,
Yeah, it's probably more like
it's extracted
280,000.
before it hits the budget.
But that's one of the values of the white sheets. That would be one I'd like, Fred. Thank
I
you.
will take care of that.
Right, go ahead.
Are there other questions? Okay. Moving along then, on page 13, down in the middle of the page, 11,214 and 11,215, tuition reimbursement, secondary tuition reimbursement, elementary. Again, as you're well aware, we do have contract language that we do provide tuition reimbursement for our teachers who do take coursework. I would tell you that as you look at it here, and it's always a guess, I have no idea from year to year what's going to be appropriate or not. We tried to make some good guesses. We overestimated somewhat this year in both categories, so you can see for the new budget year, we brought that back in line a little bit. Just so you're aware too, we do require pre-approval on all coursework that's done. That is done through my office, so that we do have some kind of control over that.
And for the public, Fred's tough.
I'd like you to move then to page 20, which is the special ed section of the budget. At the very top of the page, 12,003, sabbatical special ed elementary. Again, that reflects what I talked about a moment ago. We have one person in special ed that has, in fact, requested and been granted approval for sabbatical. Right below that, 12,021. Ralph, this is partial answer to what you're asking for. It's another area where substitutes are, in fact, budgeted. If you would turn to page 31. I'm sorry, I'm still ahead of myself here. About 26. I mentioned this last night when we talked about the teacher aides, that it was a category that in the past we had budgeted positions for teacher aides as well as our professional staff. And because of some auditing changes that needed to be made, they're no longer budgeted there. It has served, though, as I mentioned again last night, to thoroughly confuse some of the other line items, because all of the monies that would have been budgeted there are now encapsulated somewhere else, so that the numbers do look skewed in some situations. But again, as I said last night, you'll find that the numbers actually work out to be exactly what we talked about. We've talked, I guess, and at length in terms of our staffing needs, and the special ed area is an area where there is very little discretion on the part of any of us to do much in terms of adding staff. And what I mean by that very simply is that Judy has an extraordinary constraint that none of the rest of us have to live with, and that is that the state requires certain profiles for staffing. In other words, they do have maximum numbers of students, and you cannot go beyond that. So that as a result of that, Judy will be asking for more, for some additional staff this year. I would say to you that as perhaps maybe Joe was trying to get at a little while ago, a zero kind of staffing increase. This is in fact very different than what we're looking at for the rest of the staffing. We have no control here. What Judy recommends to us comes as a result of the staffing requirements that she has to live with. On page 27, we cover the TMR elementary and secondary. And again, as we mentioned last night, the middle schools are in fact covered by the secondary now as opposed to separately covered. On page 29, we have speech and language impaired. And 12045, we currently have 10 people servicing our district right now for speech and language. Speech and language is one of the areas where Judy has no choices in terms of what she must do with that. There is an additional position in the budget for a speech and language person, so that we would be moving from 10 to 11. Communication disorder position has been there in the past. On
Fred, excuse me, help me with what that is, communication disorder as opposed to speech and language.
The communication disorders program is actually a class
Okay.
that services students, and it was one of the programs that we had taken back from the intermediate unit about 3 years ago.
And that's separate and apart from monies you spend in the area of speech and language.
It's a full-time
Generically.
program. Speech and language are itinerant services offered to students over and above their program, be it in special ed or regular ed.
And that budget amount, does that represent salary of one teacher? Is that what that is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's how many kids in that class? Communication
6
disorders.
this year. The range in that class is 4 to 8.
4 years old?
No,
I'm sorry.
4 students.
4 to 8, thank you. I'm thinking, Judy, where'd you get the 4-year-old?
No, we didn't bring them back yet.
I'm sorry, thank you.
Donna, this is one of 2 positions, if you recall, we brought back 2 years ago.
From the IU.
From the IU, the autistic class as well, and that was done because there was the feeling that two different reasons. I guess we could do it better. And secondly, there was a fairly significant savings, if I recall, Judy, from what was
There
spent.
was. That's
Same
part of
with
the
this
trend of what
program.
you're doing.
Right.
Of bringing things up, sure.
On page 30, the reason I'm hesitating every time I say that, my punch went right through the page number on the page. So I had difficulty with the ones that are up here. That represents our emotional support staffing. And when I get done in a minute, I'll go back and share with you. We have other new positions in special ed, and I want to go back then and cover each of them. But it covers all of that. And then on page 31, it covers the learning support positions, learning, what we used to call the learning disabled, which is, of course, the largest segment of our special ed population. In that whole area, we're adding a number of new positions. We will be adding at the elementary level 2 learning support positions. One position will be at Inglewood, and the other position will be a split position between Hatfield and Montgomery School, so that at the elementary learning support level, there will be 2 new positions. We also will be adding a new position in learning support at Pembroke. We will also be adding a new one at Penndale, and we will be splitting a position at the high school and Penfield, so that we have 5 different positions that we're adding at the learning support level. We also will be adding another autistic class at the elementary level. Again, that's one of those highly specialized classes, and you know, when you talk about class sizes, Judy, we're talking
4 to 8 students.
8 students.
They're all ours, no outsiders, no tuition.
No tuition students. As I said, right now, we have 4 to begin with, and we're not even through all the testing and referrals we get over the summer and through the year. It would be wonderful if we could offer some slots to other school districts, but we manage every year to become full just with our own students.
You have to follow an age range too. That's
Yes,
one
you
thing
do.
Fred mentioned the classroom limits, but even if you have one that's 3 years beyond the others that you have in your class, you need a new class and separate class.
That came into play with the new regulations in the 91-92 school year, where you can't have children in an elementary classroom that are 6 years apart. You can only go 3 years. So
6 years developmentally or 6 years in age?
6 years chronologically.
You can't go beyond 3, actually.
Yeah, well, now it's 3, so that also caused us to have to do some additions.
In other words, a 7-year-old can't be in with an 11-year-old, even though they may very much be in need of the same instruction.
Did I miss T1 somewhere along the way here?
Regular ed.
T1 is in regular ed.
Okay.
That's included. We have one T1 class, and that's included at the elementary level.
Okay, wasn't that under special ed before?
No, it wasn't.
Or under learning support?
No.
Okay.
Fred, can I ask you to repeat your summary of the new positions for special ed?
Yes. We have a learning skills position at Inglewood, a new one. There will be a new one shared between Montgomery and Hatfield. There will be one at Pembroke, one at Penndale. There will be a split position at the high school in Penfield. There will be an autistic class at the elementary level. I'm not sure where that goes, what building that
That's
will be
in
in.
Hatfield.
It'll be at Hatfield. And then, as a part of that total special ed package, there will be the one new additional position for speech and hearing.
Thank you.
Where are you housing the T1?
Is it Montgomery?
Montgomery again?
I was remiss in skipping over the regular instructional program quickly, not talking a little bit more about the high school, because that is a place that we're doing a lot of different things, and I need to explain fully what all we're doing there. Obviously, I think everybody's aware that next year there's going to be somewhere upwards of 250 more youngsters at the high school than there are this year. And Dr. Bond has a unique problem in determining staffing, because it's not always necessarily due directly to the numbers of kids, but it's due to the topics that they choose to take. So that in order for him to get to a point where he can adequately decide what his staffing needs are, he has to go through that whole enrollment process. That creates problems for me, because it drags out all that time for me to get ready for the assignments, which we have to have in place for June 1. But we've spent a good deal of time, Dr. Fike and I, meeting with Dr. Bond, as well as the other secondary principals. And there's a lot of different changes that are being made internally. When we first sat down and looked at the different needs, it was interesting to see that the principals were able to work a lot of that out between themselves, that they can keep this person and send somebody else over here, so that some of the changes were accommodated through that kind of cooperation. But there are still some need for additional positions at the high school level, and also one and a half or so at the other levels. We are going to be minus one position at the high school in business ed, so that when I get done, I'll use that as a minus so that you can see what the net is. Dr. Bond will need 2 more English teachers, 2 more math teachers, 1 science teacher, and that science teacher will be a chemistry teacher, and 2 social studies. So he has a total of 7 different positions that he needs, with a trade-off of 1 position, so that's 6 positions. Beyond that, there is a need at Penfield, and this is good news or bad news, however you look at it. There's a need there for an additional Latin teacher. There's also a need at Penndale for 3/5 of an English teacher.
3/5.
In trying to get us to that point where I think we worked very hard to get to, as far as an overall 0 net, let me tell you how we accomplished that. And again, understand, I've said that Judy's needs are well out of our ability to do anything about. But in looking at the needs at the high school and the small needs, the additional needs at the other 2 buildings, that nets out about 7 3/5 positions. I talked to you earlier about the 3 IST positions, so that, again, they were trade-offs in terms of trying to get down to as close to that 0 as we could. That would take us from the 7 3/5 needs down to a net of 4 3/5. You understand and remember very well, I guess, that we're deeply involved with a reading recovery program. That reading recovery program would have us at a point this year where we initially budgeted 3.5 positions, additional positions from where we were last year. It was felt rather strong, I guess, that at this point in time, that's a program that needs to be just put on hold for a year, so that those 3.5 positions are also not in the budget. I guess, that I'm stretching a little bit in terms of trying to get us down to that 0 number, but very honestly, we net out of all that and a total of 1 additional position. But the positions that we would have had otherwise would have been the 3 IST positions, as well as the 3.5 positions in reading recovery. What kind of questions or confusion have I caused with that?
I have a comment, I guess. I have just a personal concern about reading in general. I've expressed it before. I think it's probably the most important thing we do at the elementary level. And I wouldn't want to jeopardize the reading program just to get to a 0 net. on teachers. And if you think we need them, and if you can convince us that we need them, I think we ought to have them. To me, reading is too important, because if they can't read in 2nd grade, they can't do social studies in 9th grade. Now, if there's something that I'm missing, please let me know, but I don't want to sacrifice elementary reading just to meet a predetermined goal.
And Bill kind of beat me to the punch. I was trying to think of a nice way to ask who felt strongly that we can put that program on hold for a year. I'll answer it rhetorically, but I have the same concerns, or ask it rhetorically, but I have the same concerns about the suspension of a program that we felt was a good program, that was an investment of time and staff to begin. I understand, again, it was a person that went out to learn how to introduce the program, to train others, to expand the program. And again, I have the same concerns about suspending that program at this point in time.
I don't think it's suspension as much as not expansion. What we're recommending is that 95-6 does not expand to additional people. We're going to do the same thing in 95-6 we did in 94-5.
Well, that makes me feel a little. It makes me feel a little bit better. I mean, it did sound like a suspension, but not expanding it is better than suspending it. I still believe that that's a program that should continue. And again, I think Bill's concerns, I share them completely. I believe that reading and making sure that we have good, strong readers is the best thing that we can do for all curriculum areas at the elementary school level.
Fred, driving some of the need in the high school is not only obviously the increase in population at the high school that we anticipate next year, but also Dr. Bond's tech prep program. And what I see us doing is having many programs. We're starting new programs, we're involving ourselves in new programs all the time, as opposed to maybe sequencing them in. And I see tech prep coming into the forefront now and having needs that are impacting this budget. I remember when Reading Recovery came in as another new program, but I see it's the high school's turn now, and if I heard Dr. Fike correctly, we're not eliminating Reading Recovery. It's not going to expand into this budget,
Correct.
But tech prep's moving ahead in its needs. And I see those kids in the high school that are going to benefit from the tech prep are the kids they're overdue for their piece. And these are the ones at the high school, I think, that are
the tech prep
most
has
needy.
expanded, and that's one of the reasons, like for the English and social studies, next year we'll have in grade 10 3 tech prep teams,
Right.
and there'll be English, world, culture, and business. In 11th grade, we're going to have 3 in English and American culture, and in 12th grade, we're going to have 1 with applied chemistry and applied math. So we're actually going to have 7 tech prep teams next year.
Okay.
That creates the social studies and the English increased load, as Fred's talking about.
Sure, so some of those high school needs are being driven by this tech prep. And I see the elementary kids, K through 8, are doing fine in their advantages with the science program. And I just think it's the high school's turn. And if Reading Recovery needs to wait and for another group of kids to move forward, then that's what we do. And everybody gets a little something. I don't know, more questions around from the board. Mrs. Sher, we'll do this side and then come back. Mr. Rickey. Mrs. Sher, do you have any questions?
Fred, help me with the rationale that was used. You outlined 7 positions, and then I heard positions that were going to be but aren't as the balancing. Am I understanding that correct? Are there still going to be 7 new positions from where we are this year, but it was a matter of what was expected to be or what you wanted?
The total count at the high school next year will be actually 6 more than this year.
Okay.
There are 7 different positions that are there, but the one was traded off because we didn't need one business ed position.
Because of one accident.
And business ed happens to be one of those courses,
Okay.
one of those areas that the course enrollments
But in actually,
are all over the place.
okay, there'll be a +6. It's the reading recovery. Is this super silent reading a part of that reading recovery?
No.
That's a whole separate, that isn't associated?
Yeah, Reading Recovery is a fine program. It was originated in New Zealand.
Right.
And it has a lot of good publicity, and it essentially works with kindergarten, but most importantly, first grade kids. And it's usually very closely to be a tutorial program, taking those that are diagnosed probably at early first grade that are going to have reading problems brought out and really worked on individually. We work on probably as few as 8 children per teacher in the first grade. But the important thing is that the record of it is pretty good.
It's a remedial reading.
It's remedial, definitely.
Okay.
It's not developmental.
It's not a part of the, it's not something
remedial.
in the classroom.
We have a fine reading program, and the Reading Recovery is an essential part of that. We're training other teachers from other school districts. We're receiving an income on that. I had a long conversation with Mrs. Durstein about it, talked with her, talked with Carol Tarosi, Dr. Tarosi, about the program. I'm very confident that it's a fine program. It's one that we should continue, and it's one that we should not think in terms of suspending, using David's word and Mr. Wright's word, but I think at this time it gives us an opportunity to look at it and see how best we can do it for the following year. We have a very strong reading program. We have reading as a subject area in 7th grade. I'd like to take a look at that. And I share Mr. Allen's concern that if we're going to teach kids how to read, we should really get them in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, because that's the position to get them in. And I'm not suggesting that 7th grade isn't a great program. I'm not suggesting that, but it's something we ought to take a hard look at.
One other comment, just so we were aware of, we were able to get another Chapter 1 reading teachers this year through the grant. That position is going to be reading recovery. Through the cooperation of secondary principals, we were able to get a .6 teacher from the middle schools, and that teacher is in reading recovery. So we really have 1.6 additional reading recovery teachers for next year.
But that's not a part of they're not affecting our budget, impacting the budget.
No, but we will have.
But we'll have them in staff time. Great.
We're going from a total of 24.5 reading specialists in the district to 26.1. The 1.6 is all going to reading recovery. So we have expanded slightly. We're just not getting the other 3 teachers.
Well, I think it's necessary, though, to be a little bit careful in terms of saying that saying publicly and in such a public forum, perhaps, that we're going to use Chapter 1 to do reading recovery. We have to use the money we get from Chapter 1 for Chapter 1 purposes. It may very well be that person can do more for us. I'm a little bit uncomfortable because I think that my lack of involvement at that level in curriculum, I guess, relates to perhaps the appearance of a lack of enthusiasm for things that are curricular, and I don't truly want that to happen. I would assure you that if Charlie Keffer were here, if Carol Tarosi were here, there would be a tremendous amount of passion involved in wanting to see this program expanded the way that it was proposed to do. And with all due respect to both doctors, certainly if the board feels that that's what they want to do, then I think we've met the commitment that we've made to this board to come and do what we've done. But certainly that's an extraordinarily meaningful program. You do recall that we sent that person away for a whole year. We paid for her to be at NYU for that year. And we do make some income off of that. We do sell some spots in that training program. I didn't mean to imply, David, that it was being suspended. I said that we would have improved it by 3.5 more positions this year, and we're not doing that. We still have all the positions we had before.
I may have not understood. Whatever I did here, it sounded as though that we were suspending that. But I will ask right now, as others have done, I'd like to know what was planned for the reading recovery for this year. I'd like to know what the costs are for the reading recovery so that we can all take a look at that. If there are some endorsements that we can get from from Carol. I'd like to see those and see what the benefits of expansion are, where it puts us in that long-range planning that we had for this entire program, what taking a year off from expanding the program really means, and I'd like to know what those costs are so that we can make a more informed decision about whether that program should be expanded or not.
Just one point about the funding, though. Carol gave me these notes that Win-Nor is now a Title I school, and therefore that Title I staff, I told you, is going to be used for reading recovery, but it's not a misuse of funds. Win-Nor, as of this year, last year they were not, is a Title I school, so that's a fair expenditure to make reading recovery. Okay.
Point of order, directors, it is 9 o'clock, and we did promise the community that we would have the discussion on the earned income tax, and it was going to be tonight as one of 2 nights that would be discussed. So I want to get to that. We'll finish questions this way. And I guess I would ask the audience to hold their questions in the area of personnel. We're going to have to come back to Fred. I'm going to turn the meeting then over to Dr. Persing so we can begin and continue this next 1 hour on the earned income tax. If we need more nights, we will arrange them. But I know that we made the promise to hold the earned income tax discussion this evening as a start, and we're going to do that. So let's finish the questions with the board from this side. Mr. Reckamp?
I had 3 items. I wanted to make sure I understood. The tech prep is continuing, and the educational approach is team teaching for tech prep at the high school.
That's correct.
Okay.
And not only continuing, it's expanding.
Yes, and I support it. I wanted to make, but it's a team teaching approach,
That's
just
correct.
like what's used at the middle schools. Thank you.
Interdisciplinary, they call it
Yes.
there.
The reading program, in terms of Goal 1 curriculum review, where is it in the process? When is reading back up? I don't remember where in the cycle it is.
I have that, I think it's a 96-7 is the year that they study it, and then 95-6 the year study, 96-7 implementation. But I have that in my office.
And I think that for when that comes up for close review, the 7th grade program ought to be one of the key things in it.
Sure.
The third piece is, in reading recovery, we're now in our second, going to third year of reading recovery?
I'd say second or third, too. I can't give you
We are
an answer.
completing the second year.
Second year, completing
Okay.
the second year, going next year.
One of the things, as I remember, and I haven't dug it out this week, but there was, in reading recovery, the essence of reading recovery is catch the kids young, teach them how to read, get them on track in K through 3, and the payback is you do better for the kids, but also the payback is you have fewer remedial teachers when you get up to the middle grades, especially in the middle schools. And I understand that's a long-range plan, but I'm going to dig out that sheet, and I think that it would be worthwhile in the next year, within the next year, later this year if possible, that we can do a feedback report, because we've had the person trained, we're training other people, we've trained some of our people here, and we're starting to have kids move through that program, and to start getting some measurements and feedback to the board, because I believe that reading recovery is a smart way to place our money for reading. It's at the right age with the right objectives, but we need to find out if it's working, and is there some measurements that we could get as a report to start seeing what we're getting back for our investment over the last few years.
Just as a kind of a final comment on that subject, I believe you need a report from Dr. Terozzi, but as Fred's saying and I'm saying, those 3 positions are not in this budget. 1.6 are, but the other 3 are not.
Right, I understand. Well, I'm not saying necessarily about this year's budget, but as we move forward and preparatory to doing the full reading review, like any time, I would expect that in another year, we're going to get a report back on tech prep as well. Because these programs, as they're brought in front of the board, have specific objectives. The reading recovery, I think, was aimed right on target. But it also, and I realize it's out some years, but it was my anticipation that we're going to start developing to the point where we're not going to need as many remedial positions in the middle schools because we're going to have caught more kids at the early levels. And some reports, when we make those kind of commitments over a few years, I think that the board is due some reports back to see that, yes, it is working, it's successful, and that we ought to continue to put our money there and enhance it.
Mrs. Prokowski.
Yes, I shared the same concerns as you, Bill and David, and all shared about the reading recovery when I heard it last week. And I spoke with Dr. Persing about it. I think what he's saying about stopping and taking a look at the progress that it's made, and it falls nicely in line with the Goal 1, as Ralph pointed out. And we're not getting rid of it, it's just on hold and not expanding, so we're not losing it. And we're taking a look at it, but on in favor of holding off right now is all the children are being accommodated that need any extra help. My son was recommended by his kindergarten teacher for reading recovery, but then when they were tested, whatever, he did not qualify for it. But then in first grade, he's having trouble, and I requested special help from the reading teacher. He got the help. He's doing fine now. It's not that we don't need reading recovery, but any child that's having problems can get the help that they need from our reading teachers. And I would be, as much as I don't want to let go of reading recovery either, I think it's a good time to stop and take a look at it and look at the 7th grade reading. Why do we need the 7th grade reading as strong as we do if we have a good program in the early years? And this is a good time to look at it all.
Thank you, Mrs. Prokowski. Audience, I'd ask you again to please write down your personnel questions, hold them. We will come back to personnel. If not tonight, it will be on another evening. So at this time, I would turn the meeting back to Dr. Persing to bring forward EIT.
I thank you very much. In your packet, you have a list on the last page are the steps for adopting an earned income tax. The list of possible dates. We're asked for a timeline. I think that shows you the timeline that would be necessary. I think also what I'd like to do with you is to go through a litany of why I think it's important for the North Penn School District, specifically the North Penn Board of School Directors, to consider an earned income tax. The North Penn School District is losing as much as $4 million to other municipalities and other school districts because we do not have an earned income tax. Members of our community are currently paying earned income tax to school districts and municipalities where they are employed. Approximately 15 mills of taxes are being imposed by this district to compensate for this loss. Next, imposing an earned income tax provides the opportunity to lessen the tax burden on senior citizens and others by lowering property tax up to 15 mills and excusing those who earn $5,000 or less from paying the new earned income tax. Again, I want to emphasize, I would propose to the board that anyone who earns $5,000 or less would be exempt from paying this earned income tax. Until now, funds to support public education have come from property owners in the North Penn School District. It is time to look at the way which will shift some of the tax burden, lighten the load with fixed incomes for those people on fixed incomes, and place us on a par with 4 out of 5 of our neighboring school districts. It is our hope that imposing an earned income tax of 1%, we will be able to lower property tax by 15 mills in a 1995-96 school year. In addition, we would anticipate a budget for the 1996-97 school year, which shows a 0 mill increase. This cannot be accomplished without the imposition of a 1% income tax. Let me say that again. My goal would be to make sure that we do not have a property increase, tax increase in 96-97, but we would need a 1%, not a 0.5% earned income tax for 95-96. It is the administrative recommendation to the Board of School Directors that all funds realized from the earned income tax be earmarked for debt reduction, replacement of property tax loss through assessment, through reassessment, and capital outlay. I think it was Mr. Clemens who stated yesterday, or at some time, sometimes these days and nights kind of blend together after a while, but at one time he said that it would be a good idea to, for this board to look towards having a capital reserve account. I agree with that. I think that's a prudent way of doing things. I think for us, what we've done this budget year, as you know, we've taken millions of dollars that had been expended before in bonds. We have those in the operating budget. That's a real impact on 95, 96, but we've done it, and I think the earned income tax would help that. Also, since the earned income tax would provide a mechanism by which those with higher incomes would more fairly share in the tax burden, it would be the Robin Hood principle to take from the rich and help those with less. I know that does not go down easily for some people in the audience, and I understand that. But it's something that I think we should propose, and something that I would support. I don't know why North Penn is an island for which we do not have the earned income tax. I know when Mrs. Mangle was on the North Wales borough, I know that at that time she supported an earned income tax, and I applaud her for that.
No, I did not.
I'm surprised. I thought you would have the...
I did not. No, I was here when that was approved, and I would not have voted for it then either.
Well, I think you should have, but nonetheless.
It was a nice try on your part, though, Dr. Percy.
Well, I'm a clever devil. But anyway, I would say that those who do not support this, I would say that's the Robin Hood approach. I would say that those that don't support it, maybe these are the Hood Robins. I don't know. The earned income tax does not apply to the following kinds of income. Social Security and retirement income does not get taxed. I repeat, Social Security and retirement income would not be taxed. Retirement pay or pensions would not be taxed. Interest income from savings or stock investments, disability or retirement compensation would not be taxed. Occupational or old age benefits would not be taxed. Active military service pay would not be taxed. Periodic payments for sickness and disability other than wages would not be taxed. Workmen's compensation would not be taxed. Public assistant unemployment compensation would not be taxed. Supplemental unemployment benefits would not be taxed. And I hesitate to say this last point, but it's true. Strike benefits would not be taxed. So with that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, I turn it over to the board for any discussion that they'd like to have.
Let's do so, and we'll do this in an orderly fashion. Board first, we'll start from this way. Mrs. Perkowski, any questions or any comments you'd like to make?
I think it's funny that you say it's borrowing from the rich to help the poor, because we have an average income. Our house is assessed at the average, and a 15 mil increase in taxes would cost about $120 or something, and a 1% increase or 1% tax would cost us about $450. And that's from a pool of disposable income that is rather tight at our house. And I don't think that I'm alone in my financial situation. So I would really have a hard time voting for this. Yeah, I agree that it helps those that are on a fixed retirement income. But those of us that are on a fixed non-retirement income, it doesn't help. I cannot in good conscience support this at this time. A 60 mil increase, if we were offsetting a 60 mil, then I could support it, but I can't.
Mr. Rickey.
Being the person who brought this thing up to the table last year, it would be foolish if I didn't say that I didn't think that this was a fair tax. I do believe that the taxation for education solely based on property taxes is not fair. I believe that the solution is not at this table. I believe it's in Harrisburg. I think that there has been a variety over the last 5 or 6 years of tax reform packages that have gone up. I expect there's another one this year. The solution is indeed in Harrisburg for this problem. There is, however, the fact that an earned income tax and shifting it, if you look at what can this table do, because Harrisburg's been playing this one with this one for a long time, they have not done it. I don't think, and I've looked again now, that there's any chance in the near term, any high probability in the near term that they're going to try and do something about tax burdens. I do believe that the only thing that school boards have, and currently all of the Act 511, basically if you don't have, there's a whole list of taxes you can charge, but if you're not already charging them now, you can't charge them anymore by law, with the exception of the earned income tax. And the earned income tax, and in reality, they did it last year. Now that we started talking about it, I think we do have our letter from every municipality.
That's correct, we do.
That if we would enact a tax, they would enact a tax and take their share, and I don't blame them. That's prudent on their part, and they are good municipal governments. But in fact, the relationship of how much of our tax base is it would be 10% of our tax base if we did that. It would be much more, a higher percentage of their tax base, and I think maybe for some of the municipalities it may not make sense. I believe, though, that it would be a reasonable and prudent thing for a school board to do, because I think it spreads it out. People have talked about it being an unstable tax base. In fact, from the numbers that I've seen, at least in part because of the continued growth in this area, even through the Depression, this area's the income in this area has been going up at 6% a year. The bottom line, though, is it's a good tax. Is it the right tax at the right time? And I quite frankly haven't made that decision yet. As far as is it a fairer way to tax? I believe it is. Is the community ready for it? I'm not sure, and I'm trying to make that evaluation because I know that there are a lot of people, some of whom pay their 0.5% or 1% in other municipalities, that are flat out afraid of another tax. And I don't know where I'm going to end up yet, because there is a lot of fear, and it's legitimate fear that there's another tax. So I'm sitting on the fence. Next.
I'm not sitting on the fence. I will not vote for the tax. And I guess some of it has to do with trust. And I often get upset when I hear senior citizens being used as a part of the necessary props to push a tax. As somebody who their life's work is with seniors, I think more than taxes, seniors resent the spending habits of the young. And for the first time in my 4 years here, Dr. President, to your credit and to Dr. Fikes and the professional prodding you have given the cabinet here, I've seen a real attempt to deal with spending in this district. I had not seen that before. And I don't feel it's a convenient tax, and I think it's bad timing, because this is really the first year I've seen a real attack at the budget and an attempt to control that spending. So I don't trust that tax coming in, because I believe it hides spending that has yet to be addressed, and spending habits that this board has to address, this board and the board yet to come. Furthermore, I'd like to reiterate that my first year here on this board was when North Wales Borough had enacted their earned income tax. So I had missed being a councilwoman at that time, and I would have voted against it at that time. I also don't trust the financiers and the tax professionals that come in and tell us that we will be bringing in X number of dollars, and I believe the gentleman from Berkheimer anticipated 8.5 million we could garner from that tax. I bet dollars to donuts it'll be more than that. And there begins the mistrust again, because I found in North Wales Borough they were given an approximate amount of money that they would collect. It came in higher, and sure enough, they found a way to spend it. It was not turned back in. It did not go towards any reduction or deduction of costs. They found new projects to fund. And yes, they were streets and roads and things we like to have. But I'll be darned if they didn't find more projects to spend it on. And I believe that would happen here again in this district. If there were more monies, I believe we'd find more programs or another band or another something. So I don't trust the tax. I don't wish to see the tax at this time. But I do agree with Ralph on one thing, that the entire tax picture in this state and the solution thereof would lie with our legislators. And as we need help from them with Act 88, I think we need help from them on tax reform. So, Dr. President, I do appreciate what you've been doing and appreciate the strong stance you've taken for the EIT, but my stance against it is just as strong, and I respect your opinion on this, if you'll respect mine. Mr. Weitz.
I voted against the earned income tax twice, once in 1991 and one last year. I think the financial situation that the district is in right now is one where taxes are going up, whether they be property taxes or through an earned income tax. I believe now the problems are more serious, and the income that the earned income tax could bring to the school district is what we need right now. And in this case, when the earned income tax comes up for a vote, I will vote for it this time.
Mr. Allen.
It's a tough one, isn't it? Nobody likes any tax. I can't sit here and say one tax is good and one is bad. I can't think of a good one yet. I don't share the concern that some have of distrust of others or what the monies will come in and then will be spent, because nothing gets spent without 5 people at this table deciding to spend it. So if there's any, it's up to us at the moment, the 9 of us, 5 of the 9 of us, to spend it or not spend it. So I don't have that concern that the monies will find a place just because they show up. Again, I don't know any tax that's good or fair. And I would say at the moment, I am fence sitting also. And I'm not running for election, so it doesn't really matter.
So you can sit there all you want, right?
Yeah, right. For me, it's a very difficult decision. I can probably argue both sides of it right now. I do have one question that was brought up in the past. Why don't we just enact a 0.5% of a tax and keep it all? Is that a legal, viable solution?
It's a legal solution. You may do that if you wish. The only thing that it would do would lessen the amount of tax that you would take during the year, and you'd have to up the property taxes to compensate for that.
Just the first year?
Yes, during the first year.
But every year after that, we'd only be getting 0.5% anyway.
Only getting, that's correct.
So if we were to say, we're going to do a 0.5% wage tax, earned income tax, then if the townships wanted to enact the tax, they would have to do it on their own at 0.5%. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Well, I would like that to be entered into the conversation and the discussion of what is the impact of that, and we're putting less of a burden on the taxpayers if we just do the 0.5% for North Penn School District and let the townships do as they please.
Mr. Kelly,
The
can you...
impact of that bill is, it will be a zero mil increase. There won't be any decrease. That would just get us $4 million rather than the 8 or 4.2.
Okay, the first year.
Correct.
But the second year, it has no difference in our collections of taxes, correct?
That's correct.
The second year,
Okay.
we could expect, Mr. Allen, to realize $8.5 million, to our best estimate. And I agree with what Ms. Mangel has said, and that is that it probably is a conservative estimate. We've looked at North Wales.
North Wales,
correct?
Dr. Person.
And at one time we're estimating from Berkheimer it would be approximately 100,000?
65,000.
65,000?
And it would've
But
been
we read in the newspaper at least, and I'm sure newspaper articles are accurate. But what we've read is that they anticipate getting 800,000. So one could easily see that that was underestimated by an 8-1. Now, I have no idea if those figures are accurate. We only know, like Mark Twain, I only know what I read in the newspapers.
I also neglected to add is that I support the 0.5%, not the 1%, which was part of your question. I would want the townships also to enact their own 0.5% if that's something they wanted to do.
I have one more.
Go ahead, Bill.
I'm not finished.
Sure.
I also believe that this school district has known for the last 10 years that we are going to have to be doing building projects, and no board before us took any steps except to pass bonds, put us in debt. And again, somewhat maybe of a courageous act is to say we're going to start collecting monies and saving them for capital improvements, buildings, roofs, oil tank replacements, things that come up at those unusual times. And I know that you cannot pass the tax and dedicate it to any one item legally. Any board can do with it as they please. But if we do in fact pass an earned income tax, I would like to put it towards debt reduction and future capital projects. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, student cameraman, you need to change the tapes, do you not?
I guess you didn't.
You ready? Okay, Mrs. Shaw, I didn't want to interrupt in the
No,
middle
no,
of your...
no, I think it's best this way.
Okay.
I was looking at the clock myself when we started.
Okay,
I'm not gonna
five
make it.
minutes, please, and then we're going to come back to Mrs. Shar, last board member, to ask questions, and then it'll be to the audience.
Thank you, Mrs. Mangle. I think I need a fresh tape for my...
Comments you wish to make on the earned income tax, and then we'll turn it over to the community.
Okay, Mrs. Mangle, as we all know, we've been through many discussions in the past regarding the earned income tax. I've heard the argument made regarding the regressive tax base. However, I would like to note that you cannot confuse tax credits that have accumulated, that are cumulative in nature with the amount of dollars that it's actually being reduced as far as the district's real estate property tax base is concerned. That's very much the key in the argument here. All communities are not created equal. What may be a fair tax in Upper Perk, Pottstown, Souderton, and any one of the other 12 communities, school districts that do levy an earned income tax is not necessarily the same as the remaining 10 that do not levy the earned income tax. The difference is the value of the mill and the percentage of your commercial and industrial base. As I can figure from the statistical data from the IU, the value of a mill in Upper Perk is $38,000. Is that correct?
No, that's incorrect.
Okay, could you please help me here?
Yes.
I'm valuing from your
Yeah.
valuations from this budget.
I could understand that. Upper Perkiomen exists in 2 different counties. The
Okay.
consequence of that is that they equalize millage, which you could do here, which is an interesting concept, which is probably the next controversial thing I introduce.
There's no end to it,
You're
is
on a
there?
roll.
But rather than go into that, and just for the sake of discussion, let me simply say that they have, in Upper Perk, have only 68 mills, of which approximately $250,000 per mill.
Per mill?
Yes, but because they're in 2 different counties.
Okay.
Therefore, there has to be an equalization. I don't want to bore the audience with
Okay, then I
with
won't
an
go.
academic
How about if I
discussion.
use one that isn't
But
between 2
I
counties?
think it would behoove you to think about that in North Penn, but that's a day.
Well, let's not
day for
move on to another
discussion.
tax. We'll go with, well, then we'll use one closer to home that isn't divided between 2 counties. With the Souderton Area School District, they're a little shy of $100,000, approximately $98,000 per mill. What that means is, as far as the wage earner is concerned, the mill value is what has to be contributed for your real estate tax relief equivalency. While the wage earners, the average wage in Souderton is very comparable to ours, there's very little difference. What we do have here is a difference in the property tax evaluation and what it takes to relieve 1 mil of property tax. $100,000 in Souderton must be contributed to relieve 1 mil. Their average home assessment is slightly higher than ours, so it actually brings a little higher property relief to ours than we do here, as compared to the $280,000 that the wage earner has to contribute in North Penn to compensate from the shift from our heavy and rather wealthy tax base. And by that, I'm not talking about from the residential, but from our industrial and commercial. That makes a tremendous difference. The wage earners, really, the mill equivalency here is 1 mil for every 3 that it would mean in the Souderton School District for the same amount of dollars being taken out of the pocket of your wage earners. Second, I would say that with this tax, there's a considerable amount of bureaucracy. I don't know where in the budget there has been any planning for, is there administrative expenses going to be through Berkheimer's? If in fact there was talk about it being in-house, then I'm sure there's going to be more personnel associated with that. But we can knock off 2.5% if we're using a service similar to Berkheimer's. That means the first $200,000 that the wage earners contribute will never hit the district. The $4 million that Dr. Persing referenced, I'd like to know where there's any validation for that. $4 million that is already being paid, because I have gone through every document I've received in the past 4 discussions, and nowhere near that amount has ever been validated. It may be estimated, it might be speculated, but I've never seen anything that could validate close to $4 million. 1.8 million is what Berkheimer's knows of from its records. That includes residents in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia residents, the Philadelphia workers rather. We cannot collect their taxes. They may be paying it, and they may be a part of a dollar figure of those already contributing and paying this tax, but it has no relevancy to us because we can't recover those funds. Next, I would say that when you evaluate the commercial and industrial part, which is my strongest argument against this, if I were in a different community, I may feel differently because of that. With 1/3 of the money that is taken from the wage earner being used to compensate for relief to commercial and industrial base tax losses, you have your wage earner contributing somewhere between $1.50 to $1.60 for each dollar to be returned on a real estate exchange, property exchange. As I worked through these numbers and I looked at it, the very people who everyone has been discussing as a cause of our problems because of reassessment challenges are the biggest benefactors of this. It isn't the senior citizen. It isn't going to be your homeowner. It isn't going to be your middle-class worker. It's going to be our commercial and industrial property owners. It will be those who have income from large apartment complexes, because they can claim that as passive revenue, and that's another source of revenue and income that is not taxed through the earned income tax. In the meantime, the renters probably won't see a reduction, but they'll be contributing through this wage tax. I will just simply say, I don't support the tax because I don't believe it is fair. I don't believe it is equitable, and I don't believe that it's a proper tax for this community because of the demographics specific to North Penn. If we were more residential, if we were more of a bedroom community with a lower mill value, where we were exchanging from resident to resident, I could possibly feel very differently. It's not a philosophical opposition to the earned income tax per se, but I can't for North Penn. I consider it very unfair.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Scher. At this time, then we'll go to
Mrs.
the...
Mengel, before,
certainly.
as your finance director, I'd like to just address some of the points that were brought up tonight.
when it comes to the tax, I'm here to make sure you get the best return on your investment. So I know whatever budget you approve, I'm going to get the dollars one way or another.
Right.
But some of the arguments that we've heard tonight, when people have talked about tax reform, if anybody thinks the tax reform is going to help North Penn School District in any way, I think they're mistaken. If anything, the state is cutting funding. And, you know, we can see this in the retirement and the Social Security. I think they'll be well, we can see it even in our SB. Our SB was frozen for 3 years while we got caught in a cycle of a growing school district and a flat SB. I mean, $512 that they give for each one of our students is peanuts. When, you know, Mrs. Sher, you were comparing Souderton. They get almost $1,100 per student in their basic subsidy. We're $517. What they're going to do with the retirement and the FICA, they're going to, sooner or later, we'll be getting that from the state based on our aid ratio, which right now is 0.1957. So instead of getting 50%, the way we currently do, we'll be getting 20%. I mean, so anybody who thinks the tax reform is going to help us in any way, what they're going to do is shift to the poorer and the more rural school districts the money that has come to us in the past, because that's currently happening with FICA and retirement. Anybody whose ratio is over 50%, say if they're at 60%, they're getting reimbursed 60% this year. So sooner or later, that extra 10% is going to come out of us. I don't know when, but that'll go through the legislature soon. When we talk about the commercial industrial base, I mean, I'm not out there talking to the businesses. Maybe I should be. I really don't have the time. But I've heard a number of people, the community, and some of the people from the board talk about taxes are driving the business out. Well, maybe it is. Maybe it's time for us to look at doing something that's not going to tax the business, maybe to entice business here and to provide jobs for people in the community. I mean, you know, I know everybody says that it's not going to tax the businesses. Well, maybe that needs to be tried. That's up to you. Maybe you should talk to some of the people in the business community and see how they feel.
How long would you expect this 15 mil rollback to hold? I mean, you're collecting 8 million. The proposal was to collect 8 million, give back 4 million in a property tax rollback. How long will it last? As far as I've tracked with the other districts, within 2 to 3 years, you've got a stagnant tax within your earned income tax. I mean, for us,
my feeling still is in 2 or 3 years the reassessment for the county will have taken place, and then it's going to be a whole new ballgame for us. We don't know where we're going with that. But
that's an issue because of taxation, isn't it, Dennis? As far as real estate taxes go,
sure.
What the reassessment is going to do on top of what we do now with taxation.
Correct. We really have no idea. The other thing, I guess, I just sort of resent that we're not trusted. I mean, I know maybe there hasn't been a good track record in the past. I haven't been here that whole time, and I know there's a general feeling. But I think if there was a board resolution, as Dr. Persing has suggested, that limited, you know, what can actually be done, that it wouldn't be a money grab or an employee grab or a program grab, that it was, this district needs to have a capital reserve fund. I agree with everybody, all the board members. We really do need that. Our budget reserve of 1.5 million is too low. We should be at least up by 5 or 6 million, and then have a capital reserve on top of that. So I mean, there are items that you really should think about.
Dennis, where's that in the budget?
The budget reserve?
Yes, where is the budget reserve that this earned income tax is being dedicated to in the budget for this year?
It's nowhere yet.
But the money has
been
been allocated, and the $4 million that's coming in from the earned income tax has been allocated within this budget, not for the purpose.
Of course it is. It's in there.
Well, yes, we've added equipment this year. All the complaints about equipment being in the bond fund, that's in here.
You have $4.2 million, which has been lost in the reassessment. That's what we said would make it up. And we've lowered the tax millage of 15 mil, so of course it's in there.
What I'm saying is, though, you were talking about it as being as a fund for selective items. The fact of the matter is, right now, as of this year, there was 27 mils in this budget of debt service, of millage, of property taxes dedicated towards debt service. The debt service is 7.3 million as it stands now. It's going up about 256,000. Those 27 mills are part of our tax levy. And when I hear about classifying money going and using it sort of as, I hate to use the word, but I see it as a gimmick that this is what it's for, it's a difference without distinction. The money is already being collected for debt service. If you now collect the earned income tax, you now have 27, 28 mills that you had before that you'll just use to pay the electric bill instead. It's a shift. It's just a shift of what you're designating the money for. Whether you collect the 15 mills or whether you collect the earned income tax, revenues are revenues. Debt service is a mandatory obligation that has to be paid.
That's correct,
And we
Mrs.
have an
Charbonnet.
obligation.
I think the word gimmick is rhetoric, because we're somewhere in this district, you're going to have to, in the next few years, do something to either put an addition on the current high school or build a second high school.
Right.
We will incur at that time somewhere between $1.8 and $3 million in additional debt service. So I really don't think what we say is a gimmick. I think it's a fact that it's going to happen.
Dennis, what I'm saying is whether, the issue is whether you take it from real estate and weigh your values to your tax base and your taxpayers accordingly. But to say that there's a resolution to dedicate this money because of that very fact, you have to pay that service. It's an expenditure that's mandated.
That's true, but we're trying to come up with an alternative revenue source that's going to assist to pay that.
But it becomes a
Outside
shell
of
game
real
when it
estate.
all comes in. Whatever comes in is going out, and you're just trying to say that this specific money is going to be just for this. Well, whatever it is, we have to dedicate $8 million in revenues to debt service, because that's what the bill is.
And just one last thing, I really do think you underestimate, and I realize, Mrs. Sherr, there's no concrete evidence showing $4 million being paid to other districts. But I
Right.
really do think Berkheimer, just in the number of people I've talked to in this district that pay it out to either an Upper Dublin or Lower Moreland or other school districts that have it, I really do think what Dr. Persing said is a valid figure. And I think we'd find that out if and when it's ever enacted. And that's it.
All
It's
right.
only paid to municipalities, not other school districts.
Not
People
school
from our-
districts.
Residents from our area, only paid to municipalities.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we're not allowed to tax non-residents.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I had said earlier in the evening that we would close at 10, but I think because of the tempo of the meeting tonight, that we should not do that we should continue. It would not be fair to the audience. So at this time, Mr. Bailey, I see that you're up, and Mr. Hammond, you're on deck.
I'm Charles Bailey from Upper Gwinnett. I think we're having the wrong conversation. What we're having is a conversation about whether we're going to have an increased income tax or an increased millage tax or a combination of both. And what this does is this sets one taxpayer against another. It creates a conversation of, well, I don't want to pay it, I want him to pay it, so I'm going to advocate an earned income tax, and he's going to say, well, I don't want an earned income tax, I want a millage tax, and you're going to get half the people wanting earned income tax and half of them wanting millage, and you folks up there in your great wisdom will say, well, we'll just split it in the middle. We'll do half of it one way and half of it the other way, and that'll be a nice compromise, and everybody will be happy. And in doing that, you finesse the real issue. The real issue is not who's going to pay the tax, but why can't you make your budget match your revenues? The real issue is budgeting. In every private business and every private school, for that matter, what the people do when they do the budget, they say, look, I want to spend so much money for this, we need that, we need that, we need that. They add it all up and say, this is how much total money we need. And then they look and say, well, what's our revenues? What are our sales? What are going to be our private school tuitions that we'll get next year? That's less than we have to spend. So what we have to do then, we got to go back and look at those budgeted expenditures, and we got to pick out, well, this one is less important than everything else, this one is less important, and you go through it one item at a time, and you either eliminate or reduce the least important items until you got your expenses down to match your revenues. And that's how budgeting is done in the private industry world. It's how I was taught when I was little. You don't spend more than you got.
and every business works that way, and every private school works that way, and I think the public schools should operate the same way private schools do in that respect. There should be a level playing field. And I personally resent the effort to shift the issue, to finesse the real issue, and try to make this a discussion over who's going to pay the tax. What it really should be is, how are you going to cut your expenditures so you match your expenditures against the revenues that are coming in, with having a 0% earned income tax and a 0% increase in millage. Now, as far as the income tax is concerned, I'm one of those retired people. I do not want an income tax. I would not give an alcoholic a bottle of whiskey. I would not give a government more money. Even if the alcoholic said he was reformed and would not abuse the whiskey, I would not give it to him. I would not give government more money the same way. Because you folks, I'm convinced, will ultimately do the same thing that North Wales did. I think that the money is our money. You should not take it unless you absolutely need it. And that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Bailey. Mr. Hammond and Mrs. Abram, you're next.
Good evening. I'm Chuck Hammond from Montgomery Township. I've been talking to you, I guess, for the last several meetings about earned income taxes. And I guess from many of the articles I've read and seeing Dr. Persing, I guess, on my TV more this past week than O.J. Simpson has been on there, pushing his earned income tax.
But he didn't do it.
I saw you and your two friends, Dr. Persing.
Send me copies.
And I especially like the part where they kept saying, when we pass, when the board passes the earned income tax. I thought that was a very inappropriate slip. Anyway, back to the subject at hand. I brought my two little bag tricks with me this evening, ladies and gentlemen. This one shows what your earned income tax will cost my family, okay? It happens to be a $900 bill. This is what your property tax will cost my family, as you people state in the paper, $111. When I went to school, which was not too many years ago, a little bit, not quite as far back as Dr. Pershing, but I didn't learn modern math. When I discovered, the math I discovered was $111 was a lot easier for my family to manage than $900. To me, that's $780 more, was $779 more, that I don't know what you people have a plan for. If all you want is $111 for an earned income tax, where's this additional $700 and some odd dollars going to? That's my first comment. The second one about the $5,000 earnings exclusion. That's ridiculous. That will exempt paper boys. Social Security this year allows up to $11,280 in earnings before Social Security tax will be affected. Before those people lose any money, they can make that much money. That's $6,280 that you're going to take a half or 1% of. I don't think that's fair to them either. True, they'll not quite pay $110 for an earned income tax or for a property tax, but the savings isn't that significant even for them. And also remember, many senior citizens don't have the luxury of owning a home. Your earned income tax will have a serious impact on renters, many of which can barely pay their rent right now and are working at part-time jobs trying to just afford the school taxes that we're paying these days. Think of the young kids, Ms. Prykowski over here, that are starting out perhaps with their first home. Some can barely make it from day to day, and they surely cannot afford, again, an additional earned income tax, which is significant for many, many families in this township and in this district, much more so than a $111 property tax. Mr. Bowman is quoted in the paper in favor of a 0.5% tax. That obviously won't have any impact on him. With paying or here, what's the difference? How much are you in favor of a 1% earned income tax, Mr. Bowman, and why aren't you here tonight? Mr. Bowman and other board members currently paying an earned income tax should be excluded from voting. It's not fair. It's not going to matter whether he pays it to Whitpain or whether he pays it to North Penn. The effect is on the citizens and the residents of North Penn, and those are the people I think that should have a voice on this board as to whether they vote or not someone that doesn't care whether I pay it here or whether I pay it there. Real estate agents are also now getting in and putting their 2 cents in. Too bad they don't realize the housing market peaked about 3 years ago, and all the lower-priced new home construction has forced the market prices of the existing homes down. If you vote for an earned income tax, what would that do to the willingness to move to this district? Mr. Bowman's cockily sat up here last week and said, budget by what you want, not what you have. I hope in his household that his wife is running the budget, because it must be nice to go out and say, I want to have this and I want to have that. The hell with how I pay for it. I told my boss today I needed $100,000 more a year. He laughed at me, and that's the same thing I'll do to you folks. It's about time that we started budgeting, and I agree with the gentleman before me had to say. It's about time we started looking at a zero budget, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe instead of giving out a 3.2 pay increase to the school teachers and to the employees of North Penn, if we made it a 2.9 increase, which is about what the cost of living is, perhaps all these taxes this year would go away, and we wind up with a zero increase, both in earned income and property taxes.
Mr. Hammond,
I guess, that's it?
please come back around if you wish.
I guess the last, I'll close it up real quick. The last comment I want to make is, I guess, directed toward Mr. Reckamp about a 6% earnings increase. That's ridiculous, Mr. Reckamp. I don't think anybody in this district nowadays is getting a 6% pay increase in their checks. Thank you.
I believe, just to respond, I believe the comment I made about the 6% increase has to do, and it's factual, the state information has it, the earned income of the North Penn School District, that would be taxable, has increased over 6% a year throughout the last 4 or 5 years, including the inflation. A lot of that has to do with more people coming in, but in fact, it has indeed done that.
Thank you. Mrs. Abram.
Linda Abram up at Gwinnett. I'm unprepared again, but I feel the need to speak. I'm a parent. Obviously, I have kids in this district. And I hear about big business and obviously matching your expenditures to your income. I understand all of that. But the children are coming in this district. They are here. Our buildings are way overcrowded. My building in particular, there's a development going up that is under our jurisdiction. We're talking between 400 and 600 homes. They're all having 4 and 5 bedrooms in them. We need to do something. I don't know what to tell you to do about the earned income tax or not. I don't know whether it's the best answer or not. But all I'm saying is that I think we really need to realize that in some ways we are a big business, but in other ways, unlike other big businesses, we cannot control what goes on in the real estate sector. And people are still moving in here, and the children are still coming. We have to find a way to educate them. And when I look at the budget tonight, I saw that there were some supplies and whatever that were cut back in the elementary and at the secondary level at the buildings. And I'm not saying that that's not important to do. We all need to tighten our belts. But when you're tightening supplies and you're adding more children in the building, you're spreading out for more children, less materials. And I just wonder what the quality of the education is going to be like in our district in future years. We need to think about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. McMullen. Mr. Allis, you're on deck.
Hi, my name is Eileen McMullen from Lansdale. I'd like to say, for one thing, that what we're going through in the education field and financially is kind of mirroring what we go through in health care. I'm a nurse at a hospital, and it's been a couple years that we started to really have to clamp down on our budget, and it's something that you're starting to feel the need to do really greatly. But let me tell you, another place it mirrors is most of the expenditures for both education and for health care is in salaries and in your personnel. You have 56% going to salaries as part of your budget package and 16% for benefits rather. That's 72%, and guess what? We can't change that. The teachers are going to get their money and they're going to get their benefits, and it's just a matter of 2, 3%, 4%. But you're not going to make that number go down, and that is 72% of this budget. How are you going to cut this budget drastically? I can't see you narrowing this more than 10%. So the only thing I can see on here is we need money. We need money from somewhere. And I think a fair tax is the earned income tax. My husband will probably kill me. I'm currently paying 1% tax, so it's really not going to affect me at all. It will affect him. He's not paying. but I have 2 children going through the school system, one that hasn't come through yet. I am perfectly willing to open my wallet a little bit for my children. As far as people having 2, 3, 4 children, I'm more than getting my tax money back in return on what the school district spends on my children. I am willing to spend the money for earned income tax. I think it's a fair tax. I think your commercial and industrial base can be overtaxed, and I think they are going to start fighting us more as we increase their millage without going to the people that, sure, we'd like to have that extra car, we'd like to have that extra vacation, but the kids have to come first for us. And basically, the only thing I do support is the 0.5% tax. The 1% is just going to make it easy for local municipalities to jump on the bandwagon. And to tell you the truth, not all of them need that extra 0.5%. So let them be the bad guy and levy their own tax. I think we really need the money here. You're not going to trim too much off this budget from what I can see. And, you know, to make it balance, that's even counting on the 1% tax. So, you know, you have a hard job as it is, but I don't really think the community is going to fight you greatly if you levy this earned income tax. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wallace.
Hi, I'm Jeff Allison from Lansdale. Just have a couple questions. What is the current percentage of the residents that pay an earned income tax elsewhere? Does anybody know?
Dennis, you have a chance.
There was an estimate on the part of Berkheimer that the total amount was somewhere between $1.8 and $2 million. That was their estimate
We're looking
from
at getting
2
$8
years
million
ago.
in, so it looks like about 25% are currently?
That's what it would look like. And you have to remember, Jeff, that didn't include, that was just for the municipalities that they handled.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's assume that they'll handle what, about half of the municipalities? So let's assume half. So this is only not going to affect half of the current workforce in the school district. Okay. In dollar figures, what will be the reduction in property taxes for all of industry and businesses in the school district?
It'll be a 15 mil decrease.
But in dollar figures, how much
depends on
break are they getting?
depends on what that business is assessed.
Businesses
at.
as a whole, any estimate?
We have not. I have no idea.
Okay, all right. One thing that I want to point out, as we look at this earned income tax as a way to build some revenue in a holding fund, something I've learned in industry over the years is no matter what size project, no matter how long it's planned on working, all time and money will be used. If we have a significant amount of money sitting aside, people will come up with ideas of ways to spend it. The football parents may come and say, let's put a dome over the stadium. We've got $50 million sitting there, let's use it, okay? And maybe that's an exaggeration, but it's an example of ways that people will come up and say, let's do this. It won't cost anybody any extra money because we've got the money sitting there. So things like that will happen. I also think it's unfair to levy tax on the new homeowners who took on a certain amount of debt based upon their current salary and the current taxes. This would definitely be a surprise to them because I believe until recently the earned income tax was not discussed. So people that have moved into their homes within the past year, this is a total surprise to them. And I think that would be unfair to them. People are saying that it's important that we come up with new revenues because all the new buildings in the area and children are going to be showing up, and that's true. But one thing that's important to realize is that as new homes are built, that's new property taxes. So they balance each other out. Also want to point out that the industry in the area recently got a break in having their assessments reduced. I think it's time for the homeowners to get the same break.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Anybody else from the audience, please? Mr. Graziano and Mr. Robinson, you're on deck.
Bob Graziano from Towmenson. I have to agree with Mrs. Scher in her characterization of the income tax as a gimmick, and I don't believe that's rhetorical. Because really, when you come down to it, what difference does it make which pocket you take it out of? The money's going to be spent for what you want to spend it on. If it's for a capital reserve fund, then so be it. But which pocket you take it out of really doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any difference. If you say it's going to be for capital improvements, reassessment appeals, whatever, it's still just money out of different pockets. And I could just see at some point maybe this reaching a surplus, and then you say, well, we won't touch this money, but we'll raise millage here to pay for these other programs. Well, then you're going to have the other sides of the story saying, how can you do that? We have this pocket of money here. Let's use this money. So again, it's just taking different pockets to spend on what you decide you want to spend on. So I think Mrs. Scher is right. It is a gimmick. Second of all, Dr. Percy, I think I have to take exception to what you said about us being an island. In the statistical study from the IU, of the 22 districts shown, 10 have no wage tax and 12 do. And that's 94-95 tax structure.
Well,
Wouldn't
let me
exactly
answer
call
that,
that
please. If you were to look at the geography of which I had reference to, you would see that North Penn School District is surrounded by school districts, both in Bucks and Montgomery County, that do in fact have the earned income tax, and that's my reference, geographically speaking.
Okay, but there are
If you'll pardon the metaphor.
Okay, there are a significant number of districts that do not have an income tax, but geographically that may be true. Lastly, is if you could educate me, please, but doesn't the income tax really give us a one-year pop in revenue?
No, sir. What it does, it's a continuation. The one-year pop that you would have reference to would be the fact that, I assume that it had reference to, is the fact that we would have 1% for a period of time, if indeed the board were to consider a 1%, and then would, of course, revert to a 1%. But since the time span, Mr. Graziano, as it is, it would be that we would have the 1% for a period of time. It's going to be phased in with the 0.5%, but with the period of time for 1% compared to that of the 0.5%, each one would in turn equalize to the other, so that we would receive the $8.5 million the first year, but would also receive $8.5 million as a conservative estimate for the second year.
But the
He's
point
talking about
is,
3/4. I'm sorry, you look confused. Donna was looking.
That's all right.
the point is, though, that once this tax is in place, it basically becomes stagnant, not quite stagnant. Even if we assume that the 6% of Mr. Reckham's is true, all we get is 1% of that 6%, which maybe is a mill, let's say, annually increasing. Your tax base is basically flat once you impose it. You know, the amount of revenue you get from it.
Not really. If you're asking me questions, I'll answer them. If you just want to make statements,
Well, I'm basically making a statement at that point. Your total revenues will grow, and we get a small portion of that. It's not significant. Even if you say $8 million and it goes up 6%, that's not even 2 mils worth. Okay, so there will be some growth, but it's a very small growth. So you basically get a pop, maybe 1 year, maybe 2 years, but that's it. And now that you've now taken care of that tax as a possibility of additional revenue. That leads me into the next point. And Mr. Kelly mentioned this, that we have county property reassessments coming, and I hate to raise the point, but a final settlement of what we're going to do with the high school. It would seem that it would be wiser to reserve the flexibility of what to do with the earned income tax when those two items are finally settled out. At least you'll know where you stand with property reassessments. We'll know better where we stand with high school expansion or new high school. And we'll know a lot better if an earned income tax would fit better into those plans. So I would suggest that this board not institute the earned income tax this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Graziano. Mr. Robinson. Dennis, just a point of clarification. In this budget, anticipated borrowing for this year for projects ahead.
Yes.
And the reimbursement of land purchased by a former board. You're looking at $10 million in anticipated borrowing?
Correct, but no debt service effect on this current year's budget.
Okay, so this board will do the borrowing and another board will pay the debt service?
The debt service, because we're at this point of the budget year, the debt service would kick in the 96, 97 fiscal year.
Okay, so if we go and take a 1% earned income, which is a cap on what we can take in the earned income category, then most likely with the future borrowing ahead, and debt service, and necessary debt service, then there's no place else to go but back to hitting up the real estate again. So I really don't see any more than a 1-year honeymoon here on the earned income tax being enacted.
Maybe 2.
Before you hit the real estate
Maybe,
again.
maybe 2, maybe 3. We don't know. But I mean, people talk, about private schools, I'm a product of private schools. I worked at private schools. What we did is raise tuition, except, that's just like raising taxes. And as I said there, when you can't run a full program for the kids, close the doors. When you can't, I'm not saying it has to be extravagant, but if you can't, that's why I said at the diocese, when they were talking about, well, let's cut this here and cut this here, and let's not have a prom because that's too expensive, and let's not have track. I said, if you can't run a full program and give the kids the education they deserve, close the doors because you're being unfair to them. And I think people can get up and they can say, we have to live within our means, but I don't think anybody will look at another parent and say, I want to increase the number of kids in the classroom over a certain level. People can get up and say things, but when it comes right down to it, I don't think that that they don't come up with creative solutions. They just come up with rhetoric.
Thank you. Mr. Robinson.
Thank you. Gary Robinson, Hatfield Township. First of all, I think it's a disgrace to the community that we continue to hear the alarmist rhetoric of some people that, well, we got to have the new school. My God, save the children, save the children. Without more bricks and mortar, they're not going to get an education. Utter nonsense. It is time we get past that malicious rhetoric and get down to the real, hard, cold facts of life. Mr. Persing, over the past few weeks, presented documents to the public that indicated an increase in property tax, an implementation of an earned income tax, and on top of that, deficit spending. Folks, you just can't keep doing it. This community, I think, is fed up of, in essence, government authority misusing and abusing its power of taxation to say that under threat of taking your home, evicting you, we're going to keep raising our salaries, our benefits, building Taj Mahal educational facilities. We have a limited budget. There are people in this community who haven't seen raises for years, people who've lost jobs. And for the teachers and the educational professionals, the administrators, who keep getting annual raises based on their position in government, it is time to say the administrators take a 10% cut, the teachers take a 5% cut, or get rid of all the union teachers and let's go non-union. The more complex you make these tax systems, the only thing you open up is the door to abuse of the community as a whole. And it is time to stop. If we're going to have representative government, it should be government that represents the community rather than the elite minority that keep feeding like parasites on the tax system and the property and economic viability of the citizens.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Anybody else, please? Mr. Taylor.
Thank you. I built here in Lansdale, and I know practically nothing about this subject. And I'm very grateful for Ms. Shearer pointing out to me the statement of purpose and so forth that you have hidden in the front hall. I very much wonder why it's not in here. Because if you don't have a goal in mind, why all this struggle? I, for one, will see whatever I'm going to leave to people who will be alive when I'm dead, done through the educational system. The children, my own and others, will be the people who carry what I have to offer. And it seems to me there's a choice of two alternatives, neither one of which is clear. One is to be able to have my children say, well, they sure knew how to spend less on me. And the other one to say, I am very grateful that they gave me, and I do not mean money, that they gave me the core of education, the whole business. And I would like to take one swat at something which I have said myself many times about this building being a Taj Mahal. The past 2 weeks I looked around town. I did not see one doctor's office, one bank, one store that was as austere as this building is.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Anybody else? Mr. Bailey again?
Can we have a second round after 10? I mean,
One last comment, and I'll be calm this time. If you look at the history of the income tax, going back to 1913, I believe that started out with a very small percentage, and it was supposed to affect only 0.5% of the people. And it got passed. Up until that time, it was unconstitutional. And then they had a change in the Constitution, and the people voted for it because they thought, well, somebody else is going to pay for it. It's only 0.5% of the people that are going to pay. Well, you and I all know what that became. It expanded. It taxed more and more kinds of income tax, more and more kinds of income. It became more and more complex, and now it affects everybody, and it takes about 35%, I think, 30 to 35% of our overall income. You say that this tax is very limited now. I think if you pass this tax, you're going to have two taxes, and the nature of the income tax that you pass now will undoubtedly change. The federal income tax laws get revised every other year, and this could very well develop similarly. I, for one, I don't like filling out tax forms and having to learn tax laws, and I certainly do not want a third set of tax laws to learn and a third set of tax forms to fill out and file. I think those of you who talk about reform, the only reform I see in this is reforming the fact that our taxes are too low. You folks want a second way of taxing us so that you can raise more money. It's as simple as that. The only tax reform here is so you can get more money because our taxes are too low, and I don't think that's right.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Anybody else, please?
1 minute, please.
Mr. Hammond.
I promise it'll be 1 minute. Chuck Hammond again. I think the last comment I want to address to Mr. Kelly, being that I think for the last 5 years we've tried throwing money at everything we possibly could, and we really haven't improved the educational excellence of this North Penn School District. I think maybe it's time that we looked at another approach instead of trying to buy everything. And maybe people ought to start earning things and working a little harder at trying to achieve things. It might be a better approach rather than trying to buy it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, please? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's 10:20 from my angle. That's not too bad. We took 15 minutes at the break, so we're pretty close to being on target. Our next regularly scheduled meeting will be on May 9th, and it is my understanding, and Mr. Kelly, if you will confirm, that PFM, our financiers, will be here that night to answer questions
Yes,
to the board
Mr.
and the
Mengel,
public?
they will. They'll be here by 8:30.
By
so the public
8:30.
knows.
That meeting starts at 7:30.
Mrs. Mengel, one
Yes,
mention
Mrs.
on
Sher.
the earned income tax. I don't want anyone to misunderstand. Next week is the scheduled vote, May 9th, for the intention to advertise to enact the earned income tax. I know that when we discussed it and we moved this date forward for this discussion, perhaps people didn't realize, but there is a process you have to follow. Is it on everyone's agenda, Ken? Okay, you all have that in your agenda. The vote would be for the board to decide whether or not to announce and move forward with the intentions to enact, but the final vote to confirm that intent will be taken in June at our formal adoption of the budget.
Mrs. Sher, thank you. And Dr. Persing did provide not only the board but also the public with this document. It's in your packet. It is detailed steps and timeline for adopting an earned income tax, and it's laid out for you just as Mrs. Sher has given to you verbally. Dr. Persing, anything that you wish to say before we close the evening?
One of my favorite philosophers is Montaigne. Those of you who read him, he has said that he does not know which is the greatest fool, those that promise things or those that believe the promises. With that, I close.
Quite fair. Mr. Allen?
Yeah, I have a request of from Dr. Persing that by the next meeting he have the effect on budget of a 0.5% earned income tax enactment for the first year. Is that a doable request by the next meeting?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I better pop out of my
We can do that back first.
erstwhile younger member of the crew.
Before you make promises.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I believe it, so.
Didn't we have that
Thank you.
essentially, a 0 mil? It would just be a steady tax.
Motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you.